Hello everyone, I know you watched this video to accompany you to sleep. So if you like this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, don't forget to tell me where you are from and what time you watched this video. Let's jump straight into the story. Story 1. Neal, a small town in northern Illinois with a population of just over 15,000 people, was known for its traditional values and close-knit community. Located 120 miles from Chicago, the town maintained the atmosphere of a typical American suburb from the late 90s. It had 3 elementary schools, 1 high school, a public library, and numerous churches of various denominations. The Mongan family lived in a 2-story house on Oak Street, one of the most respectable streets in town. Their Victorian-style home, built in the early 20th century, stood out with its well-maintained garden and white fence. Camilla Megan had worked at the town library for the past 15 years, advancing from an entry-level position to become the head of the children's department. Colleagues described Camilla as a responsible and punctual employee. She organized weekly reading sessions for children, participated in town educational, and ran the summer reading club. In the St. Patrick's Church community, where the Mogan family had been parishioners for more than 20 years, Camilla was known as an active participant in charitable initiatives. David Mogan, a retired military serviceman with 25 years of service, worked as a security consultant for a private company. His job required frequent business trips across the country, which eventually began to affect their family relationships. The Mogans' 3 children, Michael and David, were both married. 21 years old, Sarah, 18 years old, and James, 15 years old, were well known in town for their academic and athletic achievements. By the fall of 1999, people began noticing the first strange behaviors in the family. Camilla started appearing less frequently at community events and often looked troubled. Neighbors noted David's frequent late-night departures and returns, which were unusual for his typical work schedule. At the library, colleagues noticed that Camilla began making mistakes in documentation, which was previously uncharacteristic of her. A week before the tragic events, Camilla consulted with family attorney Robert Higgins regarding property division matters. She also withdrew a significant amount from her personal account and took out a new life insurance policy, naming her children as the sole beneficiaries. These actions would later become important evidence in the investigation of her murder. The story of David Morgan and Alexa Newman's affair began in March 1998 during a security conference in Miami. Alexa, owner of the successful consulting firm Newman Securities, was presenting a report on new technologies in corporate security. After her presentation, David approached her to discuss potential collaboration, and this business meeting evolved into a personal relationship. Had built her company from scratch over 10 years. A Princeton graduate, she possessed a sharp mind and business acumen. Her firm, specializing in security systems, had offices in 3 states and an annual turnover of more than $20 million. While outwardly successful and independent, Alexa concealed deep psychological issues related to control and manipulation. Over the next 6 months, Alexa had been working on her own business. David regularly flew to Florida under the pretext of business meetings. Alexa arranged their meetings to appear as professional consultations. She rented offices in different cities, created fictitious contracts, maintaining the appearance of legitimate business activity. In reality, the couple spent time in luxury hotels and private villas. By the end of 1998, Alexa began showing signs of obsessive attachment. She called David several times a day and sent gifts to his children despite his requests not to do so. In January 1999, she announced her pregnancy, though it later turned out to be a lie. In March, she staged a cancer diagnosis using forged medical documents. David, realizing the seriousness of the situation, attempted to end the relationship in April 1999. In response, Alexa began blackmailing him, threatening to reveal their affair to Camilla and his employers. She hired a private investigator to monitor the Mongan family, collecting information about their daily lives. During this period, she began keeping a diary where she detailed her fantasies about a life with David after removing obstacles. In June 1999, David finally returned to his family, cutting off all contact with Alexa. He confessed his infidelity to Camilla, and the couple began seeing a family therapist. However, Alexa did not accept this decision. She continued to stalk David, sending anonymous letters to his wife and employers. Her diary began to contain the first entries about plans for Camilla's physical elimination. After the final break in her relationship with David, Alexa Newman's mental state rapidly deteriorated. She began seeing a psychotherapist under a false name, complaining of depression and obsessive thoughts. Records from these sessions, later seized by investigators, showed that Alexa was in a state of deep emotional crisis, but concealed the true reasons for her condition. In July 1999, Alexa began developing a plan to murder Camilla. She used her company's resources to gather information about Mrs. Mongan's daily schedule, travel routes, and places she regularly visited. For this purpose, she hired 2 private investigators, telling them she was investigating a case of corporate fraud. Eden Malone, a former security officer at Newman Securities, became a key figure in implementing the plan. Eden had been dismissed from the company for exceeding her authority, but maintained loyalty to Alexa, who had helped cover up the scandal surrounding her dismissal, using Eden's financial difficulties and criminal connections. Alexa offered her $50,000 to organize Camilla's murder. Eden Malone brought in 2 perpetrators, Marcus Reed and John Dawson, small-time criminals from Chicago. They were each promised payment of $15,000. Alexa insisted that the murder should look like a robbery gone wrong. She provided detailed information about the Mongan house's security system and local police schedules. The criminals conducted several rehearsals of the planned murder. They visited Neil 3 times to observe the Mangan house. Alexa rented an apartment for them in a neighboring town under the guise of a company office. She also purchased a used car, registered under a fake name, which was planned to be used on the day of the murder. Alexa attempted to disguise the financial trail of the crime preparation to a complex scheme of transfers between various business accounts. She created a fictitious consulting firm in Delaware, through which payments to the perpetrators were processed. Investigators would later discover that a month before the murder, she had withdrawn more than $100,000 in cash using various ATMs in Florida and Georgia. By late September 1999, the plan was fully ready for execution. Alexa chose October 4th, knowing that David would be on a business trip to California that day, providing him with a perfect alibi. She also made sure the Mongan children would be at school or in activities during the planned attack. October 4th, 1999 began as a typical Monday in Neal. Camilla Mongan arrived at the library at 8:30 in the morning, as recorded by surveillance cameras. During the day, she conducted 2 children's reading sessions and participated in a meeting planning the fall book fair. At 4:45 in the afternoon, she left the library, noting her departure time in the registration lock. According to neighbor testimonies, a white Ford Taurus, later identified as the criminal's vehicle, was spotted parked on a neighboring street from 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Marcus Reed and John Dawson were in the car, waiting for Camilla's return. Eden Malone coordinated their actions by phone from a motel located 20 miles from the crime scene. At 5:10 in the evening, Camilla parked her car in the garage. Recordings from a neighbor's security cameras showed that 3 minutes after her arrival, 2 men approached the Mangan house. They were dressed in utility worker uniforms and carried tools, which didn't raise suspicions among casual witnesses. The medical examiner determined the time of death between 5:15 and 5:30 in the evening. The perpetrators entered the house through the back door using lockpicks. Camilla was caught by surprise in the kitchen while preparing dinner. She received multiple blunt force trauma wounds to the head. The murder weapon was an adjustable wrench, which the criminals took with them. At the crime scene, forensics experts found signs of a struggle: an overturned chair, broken dishes, and blood traces on the walls and floor. The examination showed that Camilla had tried to defend herself. Skin particles from her attacker were found under her fingernails, which later became important evidence in the case. At 5:45 in the evening, the Mangan's youngest son, James, returned home from football practice and discovered his mother's body. He immediately called 911. The recording of this call, lasting 4 minutes and 23 seconds, was later used in court as evidence that the teenager was not involved in the crime. The first patrol car arrived at the scene at 5:52 in the evening. Officers secured the crime scene and began interviewing neighbors. The investigation team arrived, led by Detective Michael Brown. By this time, the house had been cordoned off, and crime scene investigators and the medical examiner had arrived. During the initial crime scene examination, investigators determined that nothing valuable had been stolen from the house, contradicting the robbery theory. All of Camilla's jewelry remained untouched, as did the cash in her purse. This fact led detectives to suspect from the beginning that the staged robbery was an attempt to conceal the true motive for the murder. The investigation into Camilla Mungden's murder was led by veteran detective Michael Brown, who had 23 years of experience in the Violent Crimes Division. Initially, investigators pursued three main theories: a robbery gone wrong, a murder motivated by personal animosity, and a contract killing. A turning point in the investigation came with the discovery of DNA under the victim's fingernails. Analysis conducted at the Illinois State Crime Laboratory revealed genetic material belonging to Marcus Reed, who had a previous conviction for armed robbery. His DNA profile was already in law enforcement databases. Parallel to analyzing physical evidence, investigators examined the Mondan family's phone records. They discovered a series of calls from unknown numbers to the victim's home phone during the month before the murder. All calls were made from disposable phones purchased in Florida. Detectives also uncovered an unusual pattern in David Mungden's business trips over the previous 2 years. When questioning David, investigators encountered his reluctance to discuss his business contacts in Florida. However, after being presented with evidence of his extramarital affair with Alexa Newman, he began cooperating with the investigation. His testimony helped establish the connection between Alexa and the company through which payments to the murderers were processed. A crucial phase of the investigation involved examining Alexa Newman's financial transactions. Investigators uncovered a series of suspicious cash withdrawals and transfers through shell companies. Particular attention was drawn to a fictitious consulting firm in Delaware, to which $100,000 had passed shortly before the murder. Court-authorized wiretapping of Alexa's phone conversations revealed her contacts with Eden Malone. In one conversation recorded a week after the murder, they discussed the need to dispose of the tools. This phrase, according to investigators, referred to the murder weapon, which was never found. Detectives also established the connection between Eden Malone and Alexa, and the murder perpetrators through analysis of surveillance camera footage from the motel where she stayed on the day of the crime. Cameras recorded her meeting with Reed and Dawson the day before the murder. Evidence of all three suspects' presence was found in the motel room, including fingerprints and clothing fibers. By the end of the first month of investigation, investigators had gathered sufficient evidence to charge all participants in the crime. A crucial role was played by testimony from a gas station attendant who identified Reed and Dawson from photographs. He confirmed seeing them on the day of the murder fueling a white Ford Taurus, which was later found burned in Chicago's industrial zone. The arrests of suspects began on November 15, 1999, as part of a carefully planned operation. Marcus Reed and John Dawson were the first to be apprehended in their apartment in Chicago's South Side. Police discovered part of the murder payment money and a notebook containing Eden Millen's contact information. Dawson, under pressure from evidence and facing life imprisonment, agreed to cooperate with investigators within 48 hours of his arrest. His testimony became key to understanding the entire chain of events. He detailed each participant's role in the crime and revealed specifics about the murder preparation, including several preliminary trips to Neal to observe the Mangan house. Eden Malone was arrested on November 17th at Miami Airport while attempting to leave the country. She was found with a fake passport and tickets to Brazil. During her first interrogation, she denied involvement in the murder, but after being presented with phone recording evidence and Dawson's testimony, she began giving confessional statements. Malone's confession proved especially valuable as she had kept detailed records of all contacts with Alexa Newman. She had preserved text messages, emails, and even audio recordings of meetings where crime details were discussed. She had secretly collected these materials as insurance for herself, understanding she might become a scapegoat if the plan failed. Alexa Newman was arrested on November 20th in her Florida office. By this time, investigators had irrefutable evidence of her involvement in organizing the murder. A search of her home uncovered a personal diary containing records of murder planning, fake pregnancy and cancer documents, and photographs of the Mangan family taken by hired detectives. David Mangan's reaction to Alexa's arrest was captured by local television cameras. He was at the police station giving additional testimony when he learned the news. The footage shows him sinking into a chair and covering his face with his hands, realizing the scale of the tragedy his actions had led to. During subsequent interrogations, it was revealed that Alexa had meticulously documented the development of her plan. Investigators found a folder on her computer labeled Project Freedom, containing detailed instructions for the perpetrators, money movement schemes, and even alternative murder scenarios. She had also maintained a list of potential suspects she planned to frame in case of an investigation. Particularly shocking for investigators was the discovery of a collection of David's personal items in Alexa's home, including his military medals, family photographs, and even clothing items she had stolen during their meetings. In her bedroom, she had created a sort of shrine with David's photographs, demonstrating the depth of her obsession. The trial of those involved in Camilla Mongan's murder began on March 15, 2000, in the Illinois Circuit Court. The prosecution decided to try the defendants separately, beginning with the direct perpetrators of the crime. Marcus Reed, who had refused a plea deal, was the first to stand trial. Reed's trial lasted 2 weeks. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence of his guilt, including DNA analysis, witness testimony, and evidence of the crime, and surveillance camera footage. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours before reaching a guilty verdict. The judge sentenced him to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. John Dawson, who had agreed to cooperate with investigators, received a more lenient sentence, 25 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 15 years. His testimony played a crucial role in convicting the other participants in the crime. He apologized to the Mongan family, although David and the children declined to attend his hearing. The trial of Eden Millen drew significant media attention. As a former security officer and the primary organizer of the murder, she possessed the most comprehensive information about the crime's planning. Her testimony about the methodical preparation of the murder and Alexa Newman's role shocked the jury. The culmination of the legal proceedings was Alexa Newman's trial, which began in June 2000. The prosecution presented more than 300 pieces of evidence and called 45 witnesses. The pages from her personal diary, where she detailed her fantasies about Camilla's death and future life with David, made a particular impression on the jury. Alexa's defense was built on claims of mental instability caused by obsessive ideas and emotional dependency. Psychiatric evaluation determined that she was fully aware of her actions while planning the crime. After a 3-week trial, the jury found her guilty on all counts. Judge Robert Henderson, in delivering Alexa's sentence, noted the exceptional cruelty and cold-bloodedness with which the murder was planned. He sentenced her to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole and ordered her to pay $5 million in compensation to the Mongan family. The entire Mangan family was present during the sentencing. David, speaking on behalf of the family, stated, "No punishment will bring Camilla back to us, but today's sentence gives us the opportunity to begin the healing process. We are grateful to the justice system for ensuring all those responsible receive their deserved punishment." The Camilla Mangan murder case left a profound impact on all its participants and the history of Neil. After the conclusion of the trials, the Mongan family sold their house and moved to another state, seeking to start a new life away from the scene of the tragedy. David left his work in security and dedicated himself to public service, giving lectures about domestic violence and the consequences of marital infidelity. The Mongan children coped with their mother's loss in different ways. The eldest son, Michael, graduated from law school and became a prosecutor specializing in violent crimes. Sarah created the Camilla Mongan Charitable Foundation, helping children from disadvantaged families access education. The youngest son, James, who directly witnessed the aftermath of the tragedy, underwent extensive psychological rehabilitation and became a child psychologist. The Neil Public Library, where Camilla worked, established an annual literary prize in her name for young authors. The children's reading room was renamed in her honor, and the memorial plaque was installed with her photograph and a description of her contributions to developing children's reading in the town. The convicted participants in the crime faced various fates in the prison system. Marcus Reed was killed by another inmate in 2005. John Dawson continues serving his sentence, participating in rehabilitation programs, and speaking to youth about the consequences of criminal behavior. Eden Millen wrote a book about her involvement in the crime, but the court banned its publication. Alexa Newman is serving her life sentence in a maximum security women's prison in Florida. According to prison administration reports, she continues to claim she acted out of love for David. All her appeals have been rejected by the court. Her company, Newman Securities, was sold to competitors, with the proceeds going toward compensation for the Mongan family. The Camilla Mongan case led to changes in Illinois state legislation regarding stalking and domestic violence. Camilla's law was passed, increasing penalties for stalking and mandating psychiatric evaluation for defendants in similar crimes. The Illinois Police Academy uses materials from this case as a teaching example in detective training. Special attention is paid to methods of identifying contract killings disguised as other crimes, and the importance of thoroughly examining financial trails in investigating serious crimes. Today, at St. Patrick's Church, an annual memorial service is held in memory of Camilla Mongan. These services are attended not only by community members, but by people from across the state, honoring the memory of a woman whose tragic story became a symbol in the fight against domestic violence and stalking. Story 2. Acts committed foolishly and because of the young age sometimes can break the entire future life and have the most unpredictable, even tragic consequences. In the story known as the case of Daisy Coleman, intertwined the fate of several young girls who became victims of their own naivety and carelessness. They believed that this will soon be forgotten and life will return to its former course, but they were wrong. Each of the school girls was subjected to cruel bullying by classmates and those whom they used to consider friends. In 2016, a documentary called Audrey and Daisy told the stories of girls who were victims of violence and bullying. These stories took place in different places and at different times, and the girls did not even know each other. But the picture clearly showed that psychological violence is often more difficult to survive than physical violence. But let's start at the beginning. The Coleman family. It was a large, friendly, and quite happy family, which could be called exemplary. They lived in the small town of Albany, Missouri. Spouses Michael and Melinda were married for many years and raised 4 children together, sons Charlie, Tristan, and Logan, as well as a daughter Daisy. She was the second child and the only girl in the family. Both parents worked in the medical field. Only Michael was a surgeon and his wife a veterinarian. They were considered respected people in their town. All family members were sports fans and cheered for local teams. In 2009, when Daisy was 12 years old, she and her father and older brother traveled by car to a neighboring town to attend a soccer game. However, the weather turned bad that day, and the car skidded on the wet road, resulting in a collision with a car that was traveling in the oncoming lane. The father of the family died on the spot, but the children fortunately were not seriously injured. The Coleman family was bereaved, and they soon decided to move to another city for a change of scenery. The family settled in Maryville, still in the same state of Missouri, where the children went to one of the local schools and the mother got a job at a veterinary center. Gradually, they recovered from the loss and began to make plans for the future. Daisy was actively engaged in dancing and gymnastics, and was also a member of the school cheerleading team. In addition, the girl discovered another talent. She drew very beautifully, and dreamed of becoming an artist or designer in the future. At school, she had many friends who characterized her as bright, kind, open, and cheerful. Daisy had a best friend named Paige, with whom they were practically inseparable. The girls went to school together, were on the same cheerleading team, and attended the same dance studio. They often stayed overnight at each other's houses, which became a common occurrence. On January 7, 2012, when school was on winter break, Paige once again stayed overnight at her friend's house. They watched movies, ate sweets, and chatted. And when everyone went to bed, Daisy sneaked down to the home wine cabinet and stole a bottle of hot liquor from there, which she and her friend drank. After midnight, Daisy began texting a local hottie, 17-year-old Matthew Barnett, who was considered one of the most popular guys in school and was an up-and-coming soccer player. He was friends with her older brother, Charlie, with whom they were in the same class and often visited the Coleman family home. Daisy was flattered by the attention of a grown boy, and she was eager to chat and flirt with him. When she wrote that she was spending the night with a friend, Matthew invited the girls to a party at his house, suggesting that they have fun without their parents. They eagerly accepted his offer and quietly left the house, escaping through Daisy's bedroom window. Soon Matthew and his buddy came to pick them up, and the young men headed to his house, where several other kids from their school were waiting for them. Nightmare party. The party was held in the basement of the house, which the young people got into through the garage. As soon as Daisy and Paige went inside, they were offered alcoholic cocktails that the guys had made themselves. Matthew was particularly persistent. He poured Daisy one drink after another, and she drank it eagerly, trying to impress him. At one point, Paige tried to intervene because she thought her friend was already pretty, but she was asked to stay out of it. At the party was a guy named Nicholas, whom Paige had long had a crush on. He approached her and started flirting with her. They drank together, and afterward, the high schooler offered her privacy in another room. Paige agreed, realizing what would happen next. Their intimacy didn't last long, and when they went back inside, Daisy wasn't in the large room. The door of the next room where the bed was slightly ajar, and Paige saw that her friend was lying there almost unconscious, and Matthew, taking advantage of her condition, had become intimate with her. In addition, another member of the party, named Jordan, was filming what was happening on his cell phone. As it later turned out, he also took advantage of Daisy's unconsciousness and had sexual intercourse with her. The boys put the girls in the car and drove them back to Daisy's house. But her friend was still half conscious and unable to stand on her own. Soon Daisy started throwing up, and the guys literally dragged her out of the car. While Daisy was vomiting, Matthew tried to gather her hair, but he was not doing a good job. Daisy's hair and clothes ended up soiled. The guys told Paige to go inside, and they would stay with her friend until she sobered up a bit. Paige believed them and went back into the room through the window without waking anyone. She laid down on the bed, and since she was still drunk, fell asleep right away. In fact, the boys tricked Paige, and as soon as she returned to the house, they left Daisy lying on the cold ground on a January night, having first taken off her jacket. They later explained their actions by saying that they were afraid someone would see them with a drunken minor and call the police. They allegedly took off the jacket because Daisy was vomiting and had soiled it. Apparently, Daisy lay outside in sub-zero temperatures for several hours before she came to her senses. According to her recollection, at first she thought she was dead because she couldn't feel her limbs, couldn't move or scream. She was also not wearing shoes or socks, but no one could explain where they had gone. Her wet hair was frozen to the lawn, and she had to make an effort to lift her head and look around. Daisy crawled to the doorstep of her own house and slammed her hand on the front door several times. Somehow, Maline's mother woke up from the noise and, thinking it was the dog asking to come inside, went to open the door. Melinda almost lost her senses when she saw her daughter lying on the porch in a helpless and semi-conscious state, undressed and without shoes. The mother shouted and woke her sons, who immediately rushed over and helped to carry her sister into the house. She was wearing only a t-shirt and thin pants, and her limbs showed signs of frostbite. Daisy could not speak, but only sobbed occasionally. She was shaking violently and smelled of alcohol. At first, the mother tried to keep her daughter warm by wrapping her in blankets, but quickly realized that it wouldn't help, so she told her sons to carry her sister into the bathtub. There, Melinda began removing her daughter's clothes, and saw that her thighs were covered on the inside with bruises and abrasions. She immediately realized that her daughter had been abused and called the police and medics. Until they arrived, the mother warmed Daisy with warm water. As a medical professional, she knew what to do in such cases to avoid harm and minimize the negative effects of frostbite. At the hospital, Daisy's condition raised serious concerns. Tests showed that her blood alcohol level was twice as high as normal. Her body showed signs of frostbite, as well as the consequences of rough intercourse with bruises and lacerations in the perineum. It was impossible to interrogate Daisy because the events of the previous night had been almost completely erased from her memory. Then the police decided to question Paige, who told them everything that had happened to them. The friends admitted that they took a bottle of alcohol in the home bar without permission, hoping that no one would notice it. The contents of the bottle they managed to drink. So when the guys invited them to their home, they were already drunk. Paige had told them about the intimacy, and that Jordan had videotaped what Matthew had done to the unconscious Daisy. Now it was necessary to interrogate the guys, study the video, and find the victim's cell phone, which she didn't have with her. After searching the grounds of the house, the police found Daisy's gadget in the snow on the lawn. The phone saved her correspondence with Matthew, which was quite intimate. The very next day, all three boys were taken to the police station for questioning. Matthew confessed that he had organized a party in his house, to which he invited 2 girls. He confirmed that the girlfriends were already drunk when they came to them, but they, according to him, were aware of their actions, understood what was going on, and willingly agreed to everything. At first, Matthew categorically denied that he had bought Daisy a drink, but soon began to confuse his own testimony, and confessed that he poured her alcohol to melt the ice in her heart. But he insisted that Daisy was conscious during the intimacy, and that it was consensual, using contraception. Matthew went on to say that he drove Daisy and Paige home. Daisy felt sick. She was vomiting, and then he decided to take off her jacket, so she wouldn't get dirty. Her shoes, he reasoned, she had taken off by herself for some reason. The young man assured that when he and his friends left, they were sure that Daisy had gone to her house. Jordan admitted that he filmed Matthew and Daisy's intimacy on his phone, and even managed to show the video to a few friends, but then decided to delete it. Nicholas also admitted that he and Paige had sexual intercourse and noted that she was okay with it. After questioning, all three guys were taken into custody. Nicholas was the only one who did not deny, cooperated with the police, and confessed to everything, and was the first one who was immediately sent to a juvenile detention center. Detectives found the situation with his friends less clear-cut. The local sheriff sided with Matthew and even praised him for taking the girls home, but the sheriff deliberately omitted the fact that one of the friends was left in the cold in a semi-conscious state, previously undressed. Also, for some unknown reason, the video, which was filmed by Jordan, and which could have helped to shed light on the state in which Daisy was during the intimacy, was not even tried to restore, considering this detail irrelevant. Crucial to the trial was Daisy's testimony, which she gave on the very first day she was in hospital. She did not, as I said, remember the events of that night, but when asked by a police officer whether she herself could have offered intimacy in exchange for alcohol, Daisy allowed for that possibility. Later, Coleman denied this, saying she didn't hear the question and was still not well aware of what was going on. But this verbal trap allowed the charges against Matthew and Jordan to be dropped. In addition, as it turns out, Matthew Barnett's grandfather, who was once a police officer himself and later went into politics and became a state representative, became involved. Moreover, the sheriff, who empathized with the guys, noted in court that he did not consider the girls to be the young men were acquitted and released from the courtroom. Physically, Daisy recovered a few weeks after those terrible events, but mentally she remained a wreck. Daisy went back to school, hoping to return to a normal life. But instead of support and sympathy, she faced severe peer bullying. Most of the students took the side of the popular handsome Matthew, and Daisy and Paige were called liars and easy girls, ready to give themselves for a bottle of alcohol. Coleman was kicked off the school cheerleading squad and literally became a pariah everywhere she went, even though her brothers tried to stick up for her. Daisy regularly received anonymous calls and texts that were abusive or threatening, and her mother received similar messages. Her best friend and her mother stopped communicating because she was also a victim of bullying and had to transfer to another school. Gradually, Daisy fell into a deep depression, began to avoid any contact with others, and then even tried to settle accounts with life. The last straw was the arson of the Coleman's house, after which they finally convinced themselves that it was simply not safe for them to stay in the city, and decided to move to another state where Daisy could normally finish school. A few years later, when Daisy was already in college, an influential online publication publicized her story, and once again drew public interest in Daisy. This time, however, a host of people across the country, many of whom had experienced something similar, or had also been victims of bullying, stepped forward to speak up for her. And soon, a documentary film, Audrey and Daisy, was made, raising the issue of violence, harassment, and bullying. The second character in the story was a girl named Audrey Pott, who lived in California. A similar story happened to her at about the same young age, after which she also became an outcast. The schoolgirl fell into a depression from which she could no longer get out of and took her own life. Before leaving, she wrote on her internet page that her life was destroyed and she saw no point in hanging on to it any longer. This documentary project and the public support it received inspired the Coleman family to continue to fight for justice and get the investigation reopened. This time, Matthew Barnett was still found guilty, but was sentenced to only 4 months of probation, and he also paid the victim a laughable amount of less than $2,000. After graduating from college, Daisy moved to Colorado, where she planned to start her life with a clean slate. She found a use for her talent as an artist, taking a job as a master at a tattoo parlor. At the same time, Daisy was offered to take part in another documentary project, and she readily accepted. For a while, it seemed to her that everything was getting better, but in the summer of 2018, trouble came to her family again. Mom and younger brother Tristan decided to visit Daisy and went to her by car. But on the way to another state, they got into a car accident, as a result of which the young man died on the spot, and Melinda was taken to the hospital with serious injuries. This tragedy undermined Daisy's already unstable emotional state. She became withdrawn again, didn't want to socialize with anyone, and withdrew into herself. On top of that, she learned that she would never be able to have children. She was saved from a desperate step only by her favorite work and creativity, and she reflected her pain and fears in drawings and sketches. Soon Daisy began to complain that a stranger was stalking her. She again received threatening and abusive messages, but worst of all, he repeatedly came to her house. She began to feel as if a nightmare from her past life had returned to drive her completely insane. Coleman went to the police several times, talking about the mysterious stalker and that she felt threatened by him, but her statements went unheeded. In addition, Daisy discovered that the second key to her house was missing and assumed that the man stalking her had stolen it. On August 4, 2020, police arrived at Daisy's house, called by Melinda. She couldn't reach her daughter and assumed the worst, so she called for help, asking the police to drive over and see if everything was okay. Daisy was home and admitted she was very scared, but the police found no intruders, either in the house or nearby, and so quickly left. A couple hours later, Daisy called her boyfriend via video link. She was crying, talking about how she couldn't take it anymore, and then pulled a gun out of her desk drawer and shot herself. The guy immediately reported the incident to the emergency services and went to his beloved, but it was too late. Daisy died at the age of 23. Daisy became the third member of the family to pass away prematurely. Her mother, Melinda, couldn't come to terms with the loss. She posted almost daily on social media reminiscing about her daughter, apologizing to her and saying she wished she could take her pain on herself. A few months later, the 58-year-old woman left one last post with an old photo of all her children together. She admitted that she couldn't bear to live with the pain, and afterward she voluntarily left this world, shooting herself just as her daughter had done. Of the once large, loving, and happy family of 6, only brothers Charlie and Logan remained. When they wanted to take some of their sister's belongings as a memento of her, it turned out that the salon where she worked had been robbed, and the albums with her exclusive sketches were stolen. As for Matthew Barnett, his life is quite successful now. He graduated from a prestigious college and decided to follow in the footsteps of his influential grandfather. When Matthew learned about the death of his mother and daughter Coleman, he dryly expressed his condolences on his page on the internet. Story 3. On December 20th, 2017, a press conference was held during which Mark Perez, special agent in charge of the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, announced a breakthrough in the disappearance of Mike Williams, a Tallahassee real estate appraiser who was originally presumed to have drowned while duck hunting on Lake Seminole on December 16, 2000, and was eaten by alligators. Being here now, I can tell you what happened to Mike Williams. Perez said, Mike Williams did not drown in the lake. He wasn't eaten by alligators. He didn't leave town and leave his wife and 18-month-old daughter behind. He was murdered. In the interest of the investigation, we cannot yet release details, but I am happy to report that this morning investigators notified the Williams family of recent discoveries in the case. Today's story is not only about love, betrayal, infidelity, and greed, but also about a mother's resilience. For 17 years and 4 days, Cheryl Williams, Mike's mom, disagreed that her son had drowned in Lake Seminole and pushed with tenacity for law enforcement to investigate her son's disappearance. She believed with all her heart that those responsible would be punished, believed even when no one else did. I had 2 choices. He was alive or dead. I chose to believe he was alive, and I really think that's what helped me, Cheryl said on December 20th, 2017. A lot of people called me crazy, but if I had given up, we never would have found him. The day before the press conference, Brian Winchester, a close friend of Mike and his wife Denise, who later married Brian, was sentenced to 20 years in prison. Mike's mother was right. Retribution came to those responsible, and ironically, they were the cause of the truth coming out. In 2000, Brian and Denise's affair, which began in 1997, turned into a murder. Years later, they went from lovers to strangers who didn't trust each other. Brian was very afraid that after the divorce, Denise would inform the police about what had happened to Mike, so he attacked her. Denise, on the other hand, went to great lengths to get him a life sentence. She was very persuasive in asking the jury for the maximum sentence, and it was these efforts that led to Brian having nothing to lose, and he made a deal with the prosecutor. Brian was for the kidnapping of Denise Williams, but he avoided a life sentence. Denise was celebrating the victory and was unaware that the conviction was part of a deal in which Brian Winchester, 49, admitted to planning the murder and a 17-year cover-up of the murder and received immunity from any prosecution for his role in the case. In exchange, he led investigators to Mike's body, and gave a full and truthful confession. It would only be a few months later. And on May 8, 2018, Denise Williams would be arrested. At first glance, things are a little confusing, aren't they? Let's break down this case in detail. Jerry Michael Williams was born on October 16, 1969 in Bradfordville, north of Tallahassee, the son of a bus driver and a kindergarten teacher. Family and friends called him Mike. Even though the family didn't have much money, and the boy, along with his older brother, grew up living in a trailer. Those were happy times. The parents cared about their son's future, and instead of building a house, they set aside money for the education of both boys, who themselves worked part-time at night in supermarkets. The sons enrolled in North Florida Christian High School. There, Mike excelled. He became student council president, played soccer, and was active in the Key Club. At the age of 15, Mike started duck hunting as a hobby and met Denise Merrill. The young lad was a soccer player and student council president. Denise was a cheerleader and council secretary, and they began dating. Friends thought they were a great couple. While still in high school, Mike became best friends with Brian Winchester, whom Denise introduced him to. Brian later had a friend, Katie Thomas, and the two couples remained friends for the rest of Mike's life. After high school, Mike attended Florida State University, where he majored in political science and urban planning. The lovers graduated together. Denise became a public accountant. Mike became a real estate appraiser. Mike proved to be a valuable worker. He often worked 15 hours a day, and of course his career took off. In 1994, the young successful man married Denise. It was around this time that Brian married Kathy as well. All four of them continued to stay in close contact. Mike loved his wife dearly, strived to provide for their family as best he could, and had incredible energy. At the age of 31, Mike Williams achieved considerable success as a real estate appraiser. He was earning nearly $200,000 a year. The couple was able to afford a home in a small upscale neighborhood on the east side of town, and in 1999 became happy parents. They had a daughter whom the couple named Ansley. Mike's friends told me that he was always prudent. Since the young man was engaged in quite risky activities, he wanted to be sure that in case of disaster, his family would definitely be taken care of. Not surprisingly, Mike turned to his best friend, who was working as an insurance agent at the time. Brian sold him 2 insurance policies for $250,000 and later for $500,000. In 2000, Mike's father passed away. Williams was so stunned by this suddenness that, wanting to financially secure his own family, he again turned to a friend. Brian helped Mike to insure his life for $1 million. Thus, about 6 months before his disappearance, the life of the loving father of the family was insured for almost $2 million. According to Denise, on the morning of December 16, 2000, her husband woke up early to go duck hunting on Lake Seminole, a large reservoir connected to the Apalachicola River. It was the day of their 6th wedding anniversary, and the couple planned to celebrate the date at night in Apalachicola, a small town on the bayou. The wife and daughter waited for Mike at home at noon, but he never returned. Naturally, Denise became concerned and called her father, who in turn called Mike's best friend Brian Winchester. Together with his father, Brian drove to Lake Seminole. There they found Mike's Ford Bronco car near the boat dock, but Mike himself was nowhere to be found. The men went around to all the places Mike liked to hunt, but couldn't even find the boat, so they decided to call the police. After investigators from the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Agency were called, the search for Mike began. A few hours later, a helicopter pilot found the boat drifting about 225 feet from the boat ramp. A search of the boat turned up Mike's shotgun, still in its case. Apparently he never got to use it. The search became a rescue operation. Locals believed that before the 3 rivers were dammed to form the lake, the reservoir was the site of an orchard. Thus, the lake got its name Stump Field, due to the many remaining stumps that protruded above and below the water level, requiring careful handling of any motorized boat in the area. Because of this, searchers speculated that Williams hit a stump on his boat, fell out, and submerged himself in the water, his wading boots filled with water, and he probably drowned when he couldn't get out. Several other agencies were called in to help, including a dive team from Montgomery, Alabama, and the Jackson County Sheriff's Office. But the extensive and methodical search yielded nothing. Mike was never located. A week passed, and the rescue operation turned into a body search operation. Teams were given probe poles to probe the bottom of the lake, and dogs were brought to the site. 10 days into the search, volunteers found a camouflage-patterned hunting hat that could not be linked to Williams. Officials with the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Agency speculated that Mike had been eaten by alligators, which is why the body could not be found. There were actually quite a few alligators living in the lake. The Florida Department of Law Enforcement found no signs indicating a violent death and agreed with that theory. After 5 weeks, the search was called off. The day after the search was called off, Denise held a memorial service for Mike, less than 2 months after the alleged accident. It seemed to everyone that Denise had come to terms with the loss of her husband, but Mike's mother had not. 6 months later, in June 2001, an angler discovered wading boots floating in the lake. Divers searched the lake area and retrieved a lightweight hunting jacket and flashlight from the bottom. In one of the jacket's pockets was a hunting license with Williams' name and signature. The find raised many questions. Had visible teeth marks indicative of an alligator attack? None of the items found showed signs of having been in the water for 6 months. The boots were not slimy, and the flashlight still worked. However, a week later, Denise's attorney asked the court to declare Mike Williams dead. Based on the items found, he suggested that alligators and other aquatic life had swallowed the body whole. The motion was granted. The death certificate said Mike died on December 16, 2000. Cause of death, accidental drowning while duck hunting on Lake Seminole. The body has yet to be recovered. This is how Mike Williams' story might have ended if not for Cheryl Williams, who refused to give up and continued to search for her son. All I know is that I can't stop looking for him until I find him, she said. Cheryl's efforts seriously strained her relationship with her former sister-in-law. Denise demanded she stop searching and accept reality. She said, "I'm tired of seeing articles about Mike and his disappearance. I just want to move on with my life. If you keep pushing this investigation, you will never see your granddaughter again." Cheryl couldn't give up on her son, and Denise carried out her threat. If not for the mother's persistence, her son's story might have remained submerged at the bottom of a dark, algae-covered lake. It took Cheryl Williams 3 years to convince law enforcement officials to open an investigation into her young son's disappearance. "I made phone calls, put up signs about my missing son, wrote to the governor of Florida every day, compiled my notes into an evidence book, asked people to post on social media and contacted reporters," Cheryl will tell you years later. The persistent mother contacted Matthew Oresco, an alligator expert. In his response, he explained that alligators do not feed during the cold winter months. Cold weather causes water temperatures to drop, so alligators don't feed in the winter. All they do is maintain their body temperature. 14 degrees is too cold for an alligator to be interested in food at all. Moreover, Oresco wrote that after an alligator kill, there is always forensic evidence left behind. Eventually, after 3 years, Cheryl Williams convinced law enforcement to drop the ridiculous alligator theory and launch an official investigation into her son's disappearance. The case was reopened because of little-known facts regarding alligators' eating habits. Evidence gathered from interviews and a little official data convinced investigators that Williams' death was no accident. "My gut feeling is that Mike did not die in Lake Seminole, and that's the general consensus of all the law enforcement agencies working on this case," said Ronnie Austin, a former investigator with the 2nd District State's Attorney's Office who prosecuted Mike's case. The Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Agency initially took over the case because Williams was considered a missing hunter. Officers spent 735 hours searching a 10-acre section of the lake for the body, but didn't spend a minute looking for signs of wrongdoing. Jackson County Sheriff's deputies brought in to help with the search also did not consider other possibilities. Investigators interviewed everyone involved in the search and police officer, David Arnett, who was present at the scene that day. Years later said, "Some things immediately look strange. Williams didn't usually hunt alone. His truck was found in an undeveloped area from which he would have had to drag the boat over mud, not on the nearby concrete boat launch he usually used. The terrible storm that night should have pushed the boat to the east shore, but it was found on the west shore. The boat's motor wasn't running, but it was full of gasoline. If Mike had been driving the boat and fell out of it, it would have continued to float in circles until it ran out of gas." Unfortunately, law enforcement began to doubt too late that they were dealing with a simple drowning. The crime scene had already been trampled by numerous volunteers and searchers. A car that could have served as a clue was taken by the family without any verification. Potential witnesses were missed. Denise Williams and Brian Winchester became suspicious to investigators because they learned that Winchester had divorced his wife, Kathy, and married Denise. They also learned of Denise's unexpected financial gain of nearly $2 million from her late husband's life insurance policy. Detectives determined that it was Winchester who sold the policy to Mike. They also found it strange that Denise, as Mike's wife, did not want to have anything to do with the investigation and tried to prevent Cheryl's activity, even forbidding the grandmother to communicate with her granddaughter. In 2005, the newly married couple were called in for questioning, which gave nothing new to the investigation. Brian provided an alibi for the morning of the disappearance of Mike Williams. He said he was 60 miles from the lake, at home, in bed, as his ex-wife Kathy could attest. He said he had intended to go hunting with his father-in-law in the morning, but overslept. Denise's interrogation also yielded no new leads. In 2008, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement announced that Mike's disappearance was not an accident, and they believe he was the victim of a crime. However, without sufficient evidence, they alas cannot prosecute. We have suspicions, but we need proof. Another investigation failed to find out her son's fate, but Cheryl Williams did not give up again. Her efforts led to the Discovery Cable Channel doing a story on Mike's disappearance and subsequent investigations in late 2011. By then, Cheryl had become disillusioned with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, believing it was either incompetent or uninterested in solving the case. Beginning in 2012, Mike's mother wrote about one letter a day to the governor, Rick Scott, asking him to either assign the investigation to another agency or appoint a special prosecutor to do so. Cheryl sent 2,600 letters to the governor over 9 years. In 2012, Denise caught Brian cheating, and they broke up. The following year, Denise filed for divorce. After a few more years, an appraisal of the former family home was to take place, after which even property issues would no longer bind them. This event was a turning point in Mike's case. Brian didn't want a divorce. Denise didn't want to continue the relationship. They were constantly fighting, and the Williams investigation was poking fun at them. Brian would call Denise, and she stopped returning his calls. He couldn't handle the stress level. The day a real estate appraisal was due as part of a court order, Denise left her home to drive to work at Florida State University. While talking to her sister on the phone, she saw someone climb over the back seat of her car. It turned out to be Winchester. Brian pressed a loaded gun against Denise's ribs and told her to drive straight ahead. He said he had to do that because she wasn't answering his calls. Denise tried to calm Brian down, agreed with everything he said, and promised to give him a chance to save their marriage. Brian believed it. Denise assured him that she wouldn't go to the police and report what he had just done, and Brian got out of the car. As he got out, he took the brown sheet, plastic sheeting, bleach sprayer, and tools with him. It became clear that Denise had miraculously escaped death. Denise called emergency services. Brian was quickly arrested and charged with kidnapping, which is a first-degree felony in Florida, and carries a life sentence as the maximum penalty. He was also charged with domestic violence and armed burglary. The court decided to keep Brian in custody without bail. Cheryl Williams expressed hope that this development will lead to the solving of her son's disappearance case. Brian is not going to let Denise run around alone with all that money, she told the New York Daily News. I pray that he will tell us what really happened. And Brian did tell, bargaining himself an extremely favorable deal with the prosecutor and avoiding a life sentence. At first, I think we were all doing really well, but I wasn't a good husband. Brian began his story. One day I found a note in my first wife Kathy's purse and realized she was cheating on me. I wanted revenge. We often went to bars and concerts with Denise and Mike. I had been friends with Denise since high school. I was never really attracted to her. I started looking at other women differently. The affair between Brian and Denise began in October 1997. One-time drunken sex at a rock concert quickly escalated to frequent secret meetings. We started meeting at hotels during the workday. We met whenever we had the opportunity. Brian recounted he did not want a divorce. Denise made it clear that she would never divorce her husband. Public opinion was important to her, and she did not want to share custody of her daughter. Over time, the affair became more than just meeting for casual sex. Denise and Brian thought of themselves as a couple, exchanging gifts and love letters. It became clear that they couldn't go on like this. They could not be without each other, and divorce was unacceptable to Denise. Her pious image was not to be harmed. Around this time, Mike almost died in a hunting accident. Brian saved him, and Denise suddenly saw a way out of the situation. After the deal with the prosecutor, Brian will reveal, the year 2000 prompted us to start talking about Mike and Kathy's death. Denise wanted it all on me, not her. And she wanted a scenario where it wasn't a murder, but an accident. She wanted death to be left up to God. That way she could live with it. After considering various options, Brian and Denise settled on a boating accident. In doing so, they timed the murder, so that they could get the maximum possible payout on Mike's life insurance policy. They both realized that Mike had to be killed before one of the 3 policies expired at the end of December 2000. The plan was in place. Brian called his friend to go hunting. He said he'd found a great spot on the shores of Lake Seminole. Mike expected to go there with Brian and return home by noon to celebrate his anniversary with his wife. I told him that we were going to go to a special place, and that he absolutely had to bring his wading boots with him. I had to make sure he took them with him, because it was believed that if you fell overboard in wading boots, you would drown very quickly. The plan was to make death look like an accidental drowning. Once Brian and Mike were in the water, Brian pushed Mike out of the boat, but instead of sinking, he grabbed onto the stumps and began to wade through them to the shore. Brian panicked. I didn't know what to do. Mike started calling loudly for help. I didn't know how to get out of this situation. I had a shotgun. I was panicking and I shot him in the head. I didn't think about what I was doing. Things didn't go according to plan, and I needed to cover up what happened. There was hardly any time left. I should have been back home by now and getting ready to go hunting with my father-in-law. No one knew I was at the lake with Mike, so I decided it would be best for me to drive home and pretend like I had overslept. I drove home and hoped that Kathy was still asleep. I entered the house as quietly as I could. Katie was asleep. My phone was on the floor. I went to bed, called my father-in-law, and apologized. Brian did everything he could to create an alibi for himself. Then he hid the body. Denise didn't know that Brian had shot Mike in the head and buried him. Brian tried to tell her, but she didn't want to listen. It was enough for her that her husband was gone. Denise wanted to go on living with the idea that it was God who kept him from swimming out and let him drown. According to Brian, they promised each other that neither of them would ever say anything. Denise and Brian justified what happened by saying that the main reason Mike was killed was because it was impossible for them to live together. We said the money was just the cherry on the cake, Brian would pronounce in court. Investigators learned that it was Brian who planted a hat, boots, flashlight, and license. First, he needed to keep searchers from leaving a lake, and afterwards he needed grounds to pronounce Mike dead so Denise could get insurance, since a recognition process usually takes about 5 years. The lovers managed it in just 7 months, including Social Security and other benefits. Denise received about $2 million. On May 8, 2018, Denise Williams was charged with first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder and accessory to a felony, which carried a life sentence, and Denise pleaded not guilty to all 3 charges. In February 2019, she was sentenced to life in prison. 5 months later, Mike and Denise's daughter Ansley received all of her late father's assets and insurance money owed to Denise. In January 2020, Denise Williams appealed the conviction and life sentence. Her attorney argued before Florida's First District Court of Appeal that there was no evidence that she was involved in committing the murder. The murder conviction was overturned, but the 30-year sentence for conspiracy to commit murder was upheld. Denise is now in custody at the Florida Women's Reception Center. She will be 78 years old when she is released. Brian Winchester was transferred to Madison Correctional Institute in Florida to serve the remainder of his sentence. His current release date is set for July 30th, 2036. He will be 67 years old. Ansley, the daughter of Mike and Denise, insists her mother is innocent and places the blame on Brian Winchester. She refused to speak to any media regarding the outcome of the case and her personal life. According to Cheryl and Nick, Ansley's uncle, they have not been able to connect with Ansley. Cheryl is very sorry that she has lost not only her son, but also her granddaughter. Story 4. You have to admit that death can sometimes be around every corner, that no one can ever predict where this meeting will take place, in a warm home or on a dark and deserted street. Or maybe, which certainly seems unlikely to many of you, even during a family dinner. However, there are exceptions to every story. Kenny Ong's story is just such a story. Is this really possible? You ask. How could a simple family dinner end in a brutal murder that will shock all Malaysians, and the local authorities will even review the current legislation? Let's take a look at this case. Full name of the heroine, Kenny Ong Lake Yong. She was born in 1974 in the Malaysian city of Ipoh in a large family. And even though the city is considered a rather remarkable place for tourists, but Kenny herself dreamed of something else, a prestigious job, traveling, and what else could a young woman dream of? Of course, all this couldn't just fall from the sky. She had to strive for her dream, and she understood that. First, Kenny graduated from high school with a gold medal, then went to university in Hawaii, where she even got a degree in economics. The beginning was made, and it was necessary to develop further, and she, being already independent, went to Los Angeles, where she got a job in an advertising agency. The City of Dreams gave the young girl self-realization as a specialist in her field. It was there in 2001 that Kenny met Brandon Ong, who, just like her father, was born in Singapore, but left there with his family to America as a child, and was now rightfully young. Kenny and Brandon got married pretty quickly and moved to the neighboring city of San Diego. But only 2 years into their life together, there was an accident. Kenny's father fell ill with liver cancer. Her father was going to have a serious surgery in Malaysia, and it was not quite clear whether he would survive after such an operation or not. So Kenny quickly packed her things and on June 1st, leaving her husband in America, flew to her father. The operation was successful, the disease receded. The doctors assured that B. Jen, as Kenny's father was called, would live for a long time and would surely wait for grandchildren. Kenny exhaled with relief. Finally, it was safe to return to her beloved husband and her favorite job. She took a morning flight to Los Angeles, and in the evening Kenny invited her extended family to a farewell dinner at their favorite restaurant called Monty's, where they had gone on holidays when Kenny still lived with her parents. During dinner, Kenny's mom suddenly didn't feel well, and her caring daughter offered to drive her home. In the parking lot, she looked for a parking ticket in her purse for a long time, and when she couldn't find it, she decided that she had simply forgotten it in the interior of the car. So Kenny asked her sisters to watch her mother and ran to the car. She was gone for a long time. Her mother even decided to go to the car herself, but Kenny's car was not there, and neither was her daughter's. Then one of the sisters started to call Kenny's phone, but it, even more alarmingly, turned out to be switched off. The family knew Kenny very well. She couldn't afford to just disappear, and even if something had happened, she was sure to call and warn her family. But what could have happened in a closed parking lot, literally 300 feet from her family? Kenny's father went to the security guards and asked them to show the security footage. There was nothing strange. His daughter walking toward the car, checking her pockets, looking in her purse for her keys. But then they noticed that behind Kenny there was a stranger moving behind him, and like Kenny he was slowing down and speeding up. Already from another camera, the guards together with the worried father watched Kenny's car leaving the parking lot. But behind the wheel was a man, most likely the one who followed her in the parking lot, but Kenny herself, strangely enough, was sitting in the passenger seat. It all looked like a kidnapping, and the family immediately called the police. It should be given credit. The Malaysian police began the search for the missing woman as soon as they received information on the stolen car, and in a couple of hours, one of the highway patrol noticed a car on the road, which matched the description. In order not to frighten the possible perpetrator, and at the time, they did not fully understand whether it was a kidnapping or not. The police patrol stopped the car to check the documents. The car stopped. The driver was visibly nervous, but still with a smile gave the policeman his license. And Kenny, who was sitting next to him, tried to give the policeman some signs, but he was checking the driver's documents. Unfortunately, he did not understand it, but the kidnapper paid attention to it, and he pressed the gas pedal to the floor and drove away from the patrol car. The police tried to shoot at the trail, but to no avail. The car fled, but they still had the documents of the kidnapper, 27-year-old Ahmad Najib bin Aris. Let me tell you a brief biography of this guy. Ahmad was born in 1976 and grew up in Lahore, Malaysia. He was the second of 4 siblings in the family. Ahmad Najib studied until the 3rd year of secondary school before dropping out, not continuing the last 2 years of secondary education. Secondary education in Malaysia lasts 5 years because he had to work to feed his family and was a hard worker. In 1998, he came from Muar to Kuala Lumpur. Later, Ahmad Najib was married and had 2 children. According to people who knew him, Ahmad Najib was a man of good character and responsible in his work. And now back to our case. After a while, it turned out that the shooting at the car did not go without results. A young man approached the police and told a strange story. He said that during dinner at a roadside cafe, an unknown guy approached him and said that he was going on vacation with his wife, but on the road he punctured a tire and now they could not go further. The young man gladly decided to help the stranger. They went outside. He took a jack out of the trunk, gave it to the traveler, but he noticed bullet marks on the car, and on the front seat he saw a frightened woman, hardly looking like a wife going on a carefree vacation with her beloved husband. The so-called husband himself did not change the tire, but only fiddled with the jack for a while, grumbled and gave it back. The police immediately realized that it was Kenny and her kidnapper was Ahmad. However, that was the last time Kenny was seen alive. Kenny Ong, or rather her body, would be found only 3 days later in a sewer manhole near a construction site, almost burned to the ground. As the autopsy will show, the woman was first stabbed in the stomach several times and later strangled. Also not far from the construction site will be found in Kenny's car, with a punctured or rather shot tire and with blood stains on the back seat. The police, who had the killer's documents in their possession, for some reason decided to go to the address where Ahmad lived, only after the body was found. The amazing thing about this story is that the killer was at home and living a very ordinary life, as if nothing had happened, as if he had not stolen someone else's car, as if he had not kidnapped a woman who had come to visit her father during his illness, and finally, as if he had not driven away from the police officers who were shooting at him. Later, after Ahmad's arrest, forensic tests would prove that in addition to Kenny's blood, Ahmad's own DNA was in the car. We would like to clarify that in Malaysia, murders, especially such brutal ones, are extremely rare. The point is that according to the criminal code, a murderer is entitled to the highest punishment, not even life imprisonment, but the death penalty. It is unclear what Ahmad hoped for, knowing that the police have all the data on him, but he confessed everything and even decided to help the investigation, counting on the fact that it will save him from death. Naturally, the brutal criminal put on the mask of an innocent sheep. At the trial, he said that night in the parking lot, he was looking for a completely different woman, but mistaken and realized it only when he was riding with Kenny in the car. According to him, they even laughed together about the situation, and later he tried to get her to have sex with him. And again, according to him, Kenny was not even against it, and the strangulation marks on her neck were just part of the woman's sexual fantasy, which is why she died. A terrified Ahmad decided to dispose of the body and set Kenny on fire. This story was made up from start to finish by Ahmad's lawyers, because in such a case he would have been awarded only abuse of the deceased or at worst negligent homicide, given that Kenny had asked to be strangled herself during the intimate encounter. And supposedly, if this is not true, if all this is just a fantasy of the defendant, then why the captive did not run away while her captor was changing the tire? The lawyer said, such a version could sound even convincing if it were not for the stab wounds in the abdomen. It was at this point that the whole defense fell apart like a house of cards. It was obvious because the investigation had a different, more reliable, autopsy-confirmed view of what had happened. Ahmad saw a lone woman in the parking lot outside Mani's restaurant and followed her. When Kenny opened her car, he threatened her with a knife, ordered her into the passenger seat, and got behind the wheel himself. After that encounter with police officers and a failed attempt to replace a blown tire, he drove the car to a deserted location, put a terrified Kenny in the back seat, and used her several times, and later strangled with a coat belt. After the abuse, Ahmad took her already dead body outside and threw it into the first manhole, covering it with tires so that it would not be found. He returned to this manhole the next day with several canisters of gasoline and decided to finally hide the traces of the crime, filled Kenny's body with gasoline, and set it on fire. In addition, as it turned out later, Ahmad had 4 rapes against women, who fortunately did not die, but still fearing conviction, did not file a police report. Finally, on February 23, 2005, the court, for some reason lasting for several years, finally sentenced the murderer and, among other things, gave Ahmad 10 lashes. But did this make it any easier for the parents who had lost their daughter forever? Being behind bars, Ahmad tried to appeal his sentence and even wrote a letter to Selangor, the head of state, asking him to pardon him, but of course he was refused. And only 13 years after Kenny's murder, Ahmad got what he deserved. On September 23, 2016, he was hanged right in his cell. As I said, this case was quite high profile in Malaysia. Residents were frightened not so much by the brutality of the murder itself, and Ahmad's, but by the fact that it is not so difficult to kidnap a person in a crowded shopping center, albeit in a parking lot. To prevent this from happening again, the Malaysian authorities began to install as many CCTV cameras as possible around the country, increased the number of security guards in shopping centers, and even made parking spaces specifically for women. And in all this situation, it is very pathetic that for such measures it was necessary to sacrifice the life of an innocent woman who flew to her father for 2 weeks from tens of thousands of miles away. Story 5. Lovers or Innocent Victims. On April 7, 2024, the Mrs. Buryatia beauty pageant was held in Ulan-Ude, Republic of Buryatia, Russia. Cecilia Boyanova, a 30-year-old mother of 2 children, received the nomination Mrs. Top Model in it. Instantly famous throughout the country, the woman also quickly disappeared from view. For days later, the finalist went missing, and for 4 months, nothing has been heard from her. Investigators, relatives, and just concerned citizens have been knocked down in their attempts to find the missing woman. However, the further the investigation progresses, the more questions arise. Mysterious disappearance has given rise to many versions and creepy speculations. Today, together with you, we'll try to touch the mysteries of the investigation and figure out where the beauty queen of Eastern Siberia disappeared. Mysterious disappearance. April 11th, Cecilia called her husband Boris, who was on a business trip, and asked to send money for groceries. After that, she informed him that she would be doing household chores. Her husband was convinced that this would be the case, but the woman decided otherwise. That evening, she decided to earn some money on her own. From time to time, Cecilia moonlighted as a cab driver in her Mitsubishi Outlander. Despite the numerous earnings, the money was still not enough. Her spouse did not like this way of earning money, especially when she was taxiing at late hours. However, the wife assured that everything was fine and she was in no danger. At 8 USR p.m., Cecilia left the house, and an hour and a half later she was free. At around 10 USR p.m., the young woman met with her friends to have coffee together. After a short conversation, the acquaintances went home. Cecilia Boyanova said she would also go home to her children, and warned them that she would be there soon. However, her words did not come true. Instead, the woman drove up to the Absolute shopping center, where a young man got into her car. CCTV cameras recorded that the two stayed in the car for about an hour. A time later, a third man joined them. The car then drove out of the parking lot toward the 100th block. After that, Cecilia did not return home. Moreover, later it became known that a certain Stanislav Norboev disappeared with her. Beautiful Cecilia Darmieva Cecilia Balzanimaevna was born on July 8, 1993 in the small village of Tasher, Selenjinsky District, Republic of Buryatia. There is little information about her early age. However, one thing is indisputable. The girl grew up very active. She loved to dance and do sports, especially singled out volleyball. It was this sport that instilled in her iron discipline and the will to win. Having received secondary education, the girl moved to the capital, where she entered the Buryat State University. In 2015, she successfully graduated from the educational institution. After, the enterprising person registered as an individual entrepreneur and became a specialist in eyelash extensions. To this day, on the expanses of the internet, there are still ads in which she advertises her services and invites to the procedure. Having studied the profitable directions in business, in December 2022, Cecilia opened a children's clothing store, and in her spare time she started moonlighting as a private carriage driver. As for her personal life, everything is as transparent as possible. Cecilia shared important moments in social networks. Even during her student years, Darmieva married and became Boyanova. The marriage gave birth to 2 beautiful boys, Kirill and Alexander. In 2024, the children turned 9 and 8 years old, respectively. The young woman was a wonderful mother. She brought up her children in love and care. Her husband Boris did not often glimpsed in joint photos, perhaps because he did not like to be photographed. According to the latest information, he worked in the organization for catching stray dogs. He was a former law enforcement officer. Many people speak favorably of him. He loved his creative wife and supported in everything. They even say that the couple never quarreled. At least no one saw it. In her posts, Boyanova talked about visiting Moscow, St. Petersburg, Turkey, Thailand, and Cuba, supporting the information with colorful photos. The young woman liked to dress stylishly, take care of herself, go to the gym, and have fun. She was often seen in local restaurants, clubs, and karaoke bars. At the same time, she behaved with dignity. She just liked the beautiful life and social gloss. Buinova knew how to present herself. Always wore fashionable clothes, beautiful makeup, often arranged professional photo shoots. Mrs. Top Model. One day, a young woman decided to take part in a national beauty contest. Having easily passed the qualifying stage, Sezig found herself among the contestants. During the 2-month preparation, she shared everything in her account, covering, so to speak, behind-the-scenes secrets, master classes, trainings, and so on. Finally, on April 7th, the final of the contest took place. On the stage, the contestant tried to show herself and her talent as much as possible. She even fulfilled a childhood dream by singing in front of a large audience. I am my family, my husband and my children, my relatives who are always near and support me in all endeavors. I rejoice in life every new day and believe that each of us should be happy and fill this life with bright emotions. For me, happiness is my family. Every day they give me new emotions, smiles, their love and warmth, Sezig confessed during her performance. According to the results of the contest, the jury unanimously awarded her the title Mrs. Top Model. Sezig expected that participation in such an event would be the beginning of her path in the modeling business. However, a few days later, she disappeared without a trace. During this time, the flowers given at the event did not even have time to wilt. First clues the news of the beauty queen's disappearance spread quickly. The first to sound the alarm was her husband, who at that time was in Khabarovsk. On April 12th, he threw Sezig a few photos from the trip, but she did not respond. During the day, he did not hear from her. After that, he called his mother-in-law and asked her to go to their house. The village of Gorky was located on the outskirts of Ulan-Ude. As it turned out, the children were left alone, and Sezig had not been there since yesterday evening. Having heard the bad news, Boris immediately flew to Irkutsk from where he left by car. On the morning of April 14th, he was already there. By that time, Sezig's relatives reported to the police. Law enforcement officers did not hesitate and quickly organized a search operation. They were joined by volunteers from the specialized search and rescue team, Liza Alert. On the evening of April 12th, Buinova was posted on social networks. While specialists were busy establishing the route of the missing woman, leaflets were distributed all over the city and information was collected. In total, more than 500 people were involved. Many places were combed, forests and riverbanks. However, the first clues were found on the territory of the industrial zone. Exploring the area around, volunteers noticed a mattress and under it men's and women's belongings. Blood stains were visible on the grass next to them. Specifically, they found a woman's black tights, a man's and woman's jacket, a t-shirt, men's underwear, and a gym bag. In the pocket of the man's jacket were keys to a Nissan car and keys to an apartment, as well as a driver's license in the name of 26-year-old Stanislav Norboev. It is noteworthy that at that time the people who found his personal belongings did not know that he had disappeared together with Sezig. None of his relatives suspected it, so Nadezhda Boldanova, Stanislav's sister, learned the terrible news about her brother. Stanislav Norboev, when the name of the young man unexpectedly surfaced in the investigation, Stanislav's mother was shocked. She said that she saw her son on the evening of April 11th. He stopped by her house to have dinner. After that, he received a phone call and left. The guy did not say who called, but he was in an upbeat mood. He said that he would go to his apartment and get some sleep. Stas's mother noted that he initially came in work clothes. However, he soon changed his clothes and hurried away. He studied well, was cheerful. He graduated from the construction faculty of the East Siberian State University of Technology and Management. He was fond of soccer, served in the army, worked by profession in the road department. My son has always been my support, Nina Norbieva said about him. People close to him characterized him as a calm and judicious person who led a healthy lifestyle and practiced sports. He had an extensive circle of friends. In early April of this year, Stanislav moved out from his mother to a rented apartment in the 100th block. The young man justified his decision by the fact that he wanted to build a new relationship and create a family. Otherwise, he did not tell anyone about his personal life. Points of contact. It soon became clear that Stanislav Norboev and Sezig Vujnovic did not meet by chance. Something linked the young people, but what exactly it was is not known. Relatives of the missing decided to find out how they were connected to each other. There are two versions of the story. Ekaterina, a friend of Sezig, said that they met about a week ago in a nightclub. Before the institution closed, the man invited Siseg, who liked him, to a slow dance. After he found Siseg Buinova in social networks and started flooding her with messages, Siseg confessed to her friend that she did not exchange contacts with him. However, Stanislav was stubborn and insisted on communication. In her interview, Catherine was perplexed. He knew that she was a married woman and had children. His behavior was alarming. Moreover, later it turned out that Siseg was not the only one to whom he wrote. Other women were also found. Relatives and acquaintances hastened to dispel all doubts about Stanislav. They made an official statement that Norboev is a good man who is not capable of kidnapping, and even worse. At the same time, another close friend claimed that Sesig and Stanislav had met much earlier. Allegedly, they often crossed paths at training sessions, as they both loved volleyball. From here comes another equally popular version, that between them did arise romantic feelings, about which Boris soon learned. Allegedly, Sesig's husband could not survive the treason and decided to teach the unfaithful wife a lesson. Perhaps something did not go according to plan, so instead of scaring the lovers, he killed them. Either it was originally about ruthless revenge. This theory is explained by other facts, which you will learn later. However, perhaps this is why the investigation does not trust Boris and considers him the main suspect. In his interview, the man shared that the investigative committee does not want to work with him. They do not give me any information, not even regarding the conducted examinations, nothing. For example, they found some earrings, but at the same time did not notify me, did not invite me to the identification, complained Binoff. Also, the husband of the beauty queen reported that they seized the video from his phone. According to him, if he was really involved in the case, he was already definitely sitting behind bars. Who accuses me? It's their right, their understatement, he stated. The relatives of the missing woman say with one voice that they do not believe Boris is guilty. They rely on the fact that they had a lot of plans for the future. The couple was making repairs and dreamed of a third child, a girl. It must be said that as soon as Boris returned home, he immediately began an independent search. Familiar family members are sure that Boris is trying to vilify. Another find, along with the things on the vacant lot in the grass, were also found blood stains. Later it turned out that they belonged to Stanislav Norboev. A few days after the investigation began, Seseg's car was found. It was parked with twisted license plates in one of the yards. The resident of the apartment building number 60 on Stalbovaya Street reported about the strange car, similar in description to the one flashed on all news channels. It was not the first day that the woman had been watching him through the window. During all this time, the owner has not shown up. However, it was empty. After inspection in the cabin were found sand, dust, and a small branch, as if the car had been in nature, for example, on a vacant lot. On the windows of the Mitsubishi and the driver's door from the inside, there were visible traces of blood, and in the trunk, there were removed license plates. After conducting a genetic examination, experts stated that the blood found belonged to none other than Seseg. It was not possible to establish when exactly the vehicle was there. Therefore, the testimony of an eyewitness was taken as a basis. A picture of what happened after the specialists studied the recordings from the video surveillance cameras. The picture of what happened began to emerge. At 8:52 p.m., according to the cab service, Seseg finished the last order on the route barn at 8:57 p.m. She called her friend and proposed to meet. The women agreed to see each other near the Krona Flower Salon on Baltikanova Street. There they got in touch with another friend and stopped by the cafe. After a friendly conversation, everyone went away. However, instead of heading home at 10:41 p.m., Vinova drove up to a shopping center located at 158 Babushkina Street. 4 minutes later, Stanislav Norboev drove up to her. After that, the man moved into a black Mitsubishi, in which the young people stayed for about an hour. Then another man appeared out of nowhere. He joined them, and they drove off in an unknown direction. At 12:19 at night, street cameras recorded the Mitsubishi at the intersection of Babushkina and Rinchino Streets. The vehicle was moving towards Doma Stroitelnaya Street. Further, their trail disappeared. In addition, the investigators managed to establish something else. At 12:44 a.m., Seseg visited her telegram for the last time, and an hour later, her car was speeding back at breakneck speed. On April 12th at 6:28 a.m., Buinova's cell phone was fixed at 5 Sekianova Street. This address is not far from where Seseg's Mitsubishi was later found. New information. As new leads emerged, The possibility of finding the missing alive was melting before our eyes. But the main mystery, perhaps, is the identity of the third person who got into the car. Investigators are in no hurry to name him, but there are reports that he previously worked in the police. This version arose after the guards of the industrial area, where the things were found earlier, shed light on the ill-fated night. Was a car in the vacant lot, and they saw a man near the railroad tracks. For safety reasons, they reported the matter to their superiors. Several guards then went to the location to investigate the situation. A man wearing a cap was driving the car. The men arrived and asked him what he was doing here. The latter replied that the car had stalled. He then showed his police identification card. When the guards decided to check the surrounding area, the car suddenly started and drove away. They later identified the vehicle in which the unknown man was sitting. It was Benova's car. Unfortunately, they could not remember the appearance and the data given in the ID card. Employees of the industrial zone referred to the dark time of day and poor visibility. The fact that the mystery passenger was not simple was indicated by many things, including the place where the car was located. It turns out that he was standing in the blind spot from the nearest CCTV cameras. After a while, the popular show Malakhov on the television channel took up the investigation of the case. In the course of it sounded different versions of what happened. In the studio were present relatives of the missing and experts. However, the most important were unique footage from CCTV cameras, which were shown for the first time. They show how a car, similar to Seg's car, drives into the vacant lot and stops. Then several people get out of it. Some movements resembling a fight begin. One of them falls down. The other pulls something large and long away from the car. Then the man who was pulling something gets back into the car and drives away. However, 45 minutes later, he returns again. As time passed, two unknown men approached him, and then the headlights went out and the picture disappeared. Perhaps the released video will give a new twist to the tangled case, and there will be positive developments in it. There are plenty of oddities in the disappearance of Saseg and Stanislav. On the night of April 11, 12, not far from where the evidence was found, outbuildings were burning. Some people believe it was not accidental. Someone intentionally committed arson to destroy all traces. In addition, the next day, unknown persons poured concrete on the place where Benova's Mitsubishi with 3 passengers was supposedly located. One thing is clear. The case is covered with mystery, and someone deliberately prevents its disclosure. Why did the search stop? By April 17th, hundreds of volunteers combed Domo Strojtelnia Street and the entire industrial zone, abandoned buildings, ravines and woodlands, hills and wastelands. Conducting searches in the water area of the river turned out to be problematic, as at that time the ice drift began. However, as much as possible, the search operation was carried out. At that moment, more than 2,000 leaflets were distributed all over Ulan-Uighur. A huge number of people were questioned. However, as soon as concerned citizens from other regions started heading to the city, the search group Liza Alert announced the suspension of its activities. In their post on the social network, the leadership explained that their headquarters had done a tremendous amount of work in 5 days. "We do not finish our work," the text read. "The search for Saseg and Stanislav continues. We are waiting for new evidence, ready to process it, and go on autonomous tasks." During this time, several other items have been found in the investigation area that could conceivably belong to Saseg. Among them, women's boots, an e-cigarette, and a hat. However, at the moment of the finds, only a man's jacket with documents and keys have been officially confirmed. Apparently, the other things have nothing to do with the case, or information about them is not disclosed. Volunteers noted that there is a lot of garbage and miscellaneous junk on the vacant lot, which makes the inspection much more difficult. The search for Sezeg Buinova and Stanislav Norboev continues to this day, but by relatives. The relatives of the missing have joined their efforts, despite the suspicions that have arisen about Stanislav. Families and their acquaintances take to the streets after working hours and on weekends. There are about 10 of us. Strangers are calling, interested in the results, worried, offering help. Now law enforcers, family, and friends are doing it. Of course, we would like to once again gather volunteers and walk the place. The children are waiting for their mom. They don't know what happened. So far we have told them that mom has left, shared Svetlana Mitopova, Seseg's aunt. Nina Norbieva said that she feels that her son is alive. The woman stated that she would believe it until she was convinced otherwise. The silence was interrupted. It is striking that after the public outcry, there is a sharp silence. People are perplexed and speculate why the Liza Alert Squad, after finding important leads, quickly called off the search. And afterward, they closed comments to posts about Seseg, explaining it with ethical considerations. In the first week, hundreds of people dropped what they were doing and took to the streets in search of the missing. Understandably, they were extremely outraged and waited for some kind of explanation. Finally, on May 29th, the authorities broke the silence and made an official statement. They reported that murder is being considered as the main version. The suspect is the person who got into Seseg's car near the shopping center. Work is underway to improve the quality of the video footage to identify the person. Otherwise, investigative operative search and search activities continue in the criminal case. Evidence in the case. Thus, at this point in the case of Seseg and Stanislav's disappearance, there are the following official leads. First, the items found in the vacant lot. Norboyev's jacket, keys, and driver's license. The second lead is other items, the identity of which is not known. The third clue is a large blood stain found there. The fourth lead is a woman's car left in the yard with no license plates and blood stains. The fifth clue is the CCTV footage, which shows the route of the Mitsubishi on the night of April 11, 12. And finally, the sixth lead is the testimony of witnesses and eyewitnesses. Forensic and genomic tests are being conducted on the available evidence. No further information is available. Versions. The main theory is murder. The first person who comes to mind is Boris Binov. He may well have been involved in the massacre, and the infidelity of his wife could be the motive for the crime. But this is just speculation. Seseg's relatives reported that they did not find any compromising correspondence in Seseg's computer. Boris admitted that he had been questioned by investigators more than once and passed a polygraph. At the same time, many circumstances raised doubts. First of all, Boris's work in law enforcement agencies in the past. We remember that the unknown man showed his service ID and could well be a former colleague of the suspect. Secondly, Binov's strange business trip on the day of his wife's disappearance, 1,500 miles away. It is as if he took care of his alibi in advance. The second issue is the questionable nature of the trip itself regarding the capture of stray dogs, especially over such a long distance. Thirdly, Binova's expensive automobile was not destroyed, and after all, it is a jointly acquired property, and in case of what it will always be able to dispose of the second spouse. The second version is kidnapping. Allegedly, Stanislav fell so much in love with a woman who did not reciprocate that he stole her. However, this raises many questions. Who is the third person in the car, and for what purpose? Is Seseg alive at this point? And if so, where is she? The next theory is a criminal showdown over debts. It is possible that at one time, the woman sought financial help from people with a criminal lifestyle, perhaps to build a business, or maybe in preparation for a beauty pageant. When the time came to pay off her debts, something went wrong. Hence Seseg's desire to moonlight as a cab driver. Also, on the day she disappeared, she asked her husband for some money. Obviously, it was a small amount, but there is a possibility that she was collecting the necessary amount. That would explain Stanislav's presence in Binova's car. Perhaps she did not tell Boris about her problems, but invited an athlete she knew to the meeting as a defense. In that case, killing them is illogical and rather wrong. It is important for the creditor to fulfill the debtor's obligations, even if overdue. The fourth version is the most banal, but it is quite possible. Seseg and Stanislav could have encountered an inadequate traveling companion. Especially after the contest Mrs. Beryatia 2024, the woman was widely known. The criminal could have been her secret admirer who put his sick fantasy into practice. There is another version of events. What if the two lovers simply ran away and to be forgotten in time were forced to stage a crime? Although it is unlikely that the young people would go for such a thing. Seseg had children she would never abandon. Stanislav had a mother and a sister. There are few people willing to build their happiness on the misfortune of others, instead of the bottom line. As we can see, there are many versions of events. It is possible that over time in the case of Buinova and Norboev something will become clearer. However, it may also happen that we will never know what really happened. However, this investigation has brought us a little closer to solving a very strange disappearance. Story 6. The case of Jordan Worth, a woman with an angelic face, sheds light on the grim reality of domestic violence. Statistics on victims of domestic violence are not just difficult to keep but virtually impossible, because many people simply do not seek help. not wanting to make a fool of themselves, so to speak. Sometimes people endure years of abuse, beatings, and humiliation, and some facts are revealed only when the irreparable happens. Simply put, these statistics are often based on dead bodies. The case of a young English woman named Jordan Worth made headlines across the country in 2018 and was in many ways, if not unique, then at least special. First, this fragile person with an angelic appearance destroyed the stereotype that cruel tyrants and abusers in relationships are men because they are trivially stronger physically. She became the first woman in British history to receive a real prison sentence for domestic violence and coercive control, because previously, only men were imprisoned on such charges. Fortunately, tragedy was avoided in this story, but the very fact that a young woman and mother of 2 children almost tortured to death the father of her heirs causes, at the very least, bewilderment. Now let's understand how, in principle, such a situation could develop and why Worth's chosen one, Alex Skeel, tolerated inhuman treatment for so long and did not go to the police even when his life was in real danger. Alex Skeel's life before he met Jordan Worth Alexander was born on August 17, 1995, in a town called Kingston upon Hull in a fairly well-to-do, friendly, and loving family. He and his twin brother were welcome and long-awaited children, but they were born much earlier than expected, causing doctors to seriously fear for them and make no prognosis. The boys spent the first months of their lives in the hospital and special chambers for premature babies with critically low body weight. But thanks to the efforts of experienced doctors, the children soon recovered. True, Alexander's brother gained weight faster, and by his first birthday, he had practically no traces and consequences of prematurity. But Alex himself turned out to be weaker. Moreover, he suffered from an excessive accumulation of fluid in the brain, hydrocephalus, which led to a disability. Nevertheless, Alexander's health problems from birth did not affect his intellectual development, and physically, he was not much different from his peers, and even actively engaged in sports at school. The Skeel spouses adored their sons from infancy, surrounded them with love and care, and spared no effort or money to give them a good education and provide a better life. After graduating from high school, both brothers entered the prestigious Bedford College, where they continued their studies. Alexander was smart enough, had an attractive appearance, tried to regularly attend the gym, and in general, enjoyed success with the opposite sex. Except that, unlike his brother who willingly went on dates, Alexander was quite shy and more focused on his studies. It was in college that Alex met a young beauty named Jordan Worth. The girl was his age, grew up in a wealthy family, and from a young age, knew almost nothing to refuse. She dressed beautifully and expensively, carefully watched her appearance, and led an active social life. Jordan was considered one of the most popular girls in college, courted by many guys. In addition, she, in parallel with her studies, worked as a volunteer raising funds and organizing assistance to local shelters for homeless animals and starving children in Africa. Worth was even repeatedly recognized for her efforts and for trying to make the world a better place. At first glance, this girl seemed a real angel in the flesh. Kind, sympathetic, intelligent, and beautiful. Alexander fell in love with her at first sight, but initially thought that the bright and popular Jordan would not even pay attention to him. However, as it turned out, he also immediately appealed to her, and she herself became the initiator of their acquaintance. Worth was much more experienced in amorous affairs, but for the modest Skeel, she was the very first love of his life. The couple began dating in 2012 when they were both barely 17 years old, and at first, everything worked out more than well. Young and in love, they spent a lot of time together and were practically inseparable. In college, they were called the most beautiful couple, which was very flattering to Jordan. The first 6 months of their relationship were filled with love, romance, and mutual respect. They tried to make each other pleasant surprises and gave cute gifts on small, but already important dates. Their social media accounts were daily adorned with joint photos where they appeared happy together, accompanied by touching captions and declarations of love from the outside. It seemed that these two were simply made for each other and had a long and happy life ahead of them. Quite quickly, the young couple decided to live together and rented an apartment. Since they were both still students, significant financial assistance was provided by their parents, who, by the way, were not against the relationship. Jordan even liked Alexander's parents because she seemed to be a serious girl who planned to become a teacher of art history and generally made a positive impression on others. However, as time passed, Worth's behavior began to change. It all started with increased control, which escalated with each month of their life together. She demanded that her boyfriend report every step, unapologetically checked his personal, and arranged wild scenes of jealousy without any reason. Alexander tried not to pay attention to this because he was in love, and such behavior did not bother him too much, even when she began to choose his clothes and forced him to wear only what she bought. He wrote it off as care on her part. Soon, Jordan began to limit his circle of socialization. She chose with whom and when he could see, and whom he could no longer keep in touch with. This separation affected not only his friends and fellow students, but also his family members. Since Alex never complained to anyone, they continued to look like a happy, perfect couple in public and on social media. Jordan began to revel in her impunity. She deleted contact from his phone without his knowledge, blocked his family and friends, and even responded to messages on his behalf, often in a rude and insulting manner. She then erased the correspondence so that Alex didn't even know what had been said to people, leading to strained relationships. The first alarm was raised by Alexander's twin brother when Jordan began to prevent their communication. By that time, the parents of the brothers also noticed that Alex had distanced himself from the family and was avoiding them. Jordan was openly rude to them when they tried to reach out. In rare moments when his mother could get through to him, she warned him to leave Jordan, predicting that nothing good would come of this affair. However, Alex, deeply in love, defended her, insisting she was just being caring. Soon, the Skeel family became aware that Jordan had forced Alex to drop out of college, leave sports, and get a job. She then took all his earnings and spent the money on herself. The parents made another attempt to talk to Alex and convince him to leave Jordan, but their efforts were unsuccessful. In 2013, during his adulthood celebration, Jordan committed a disgusting act which she got away with. She and her friends were celebrating at a country hotel, and at some point, she disappeared without informing anyone. Alexander was frantic with worry. She returned in the morning, heavily intoxicated, and when he tried to find out where she had been, she attacked him with fists and insults, laughing and saying she didn't have to report to him. 2 months later, during Alexander's 18th birthday celebration, Jordan got into a fight in front of his family and friends. She beat up a 15-year-old girl neighbor who had been invited to the party, thinking the girl was talking too sweetly to Alex. She was barely calmed down, but it was clear to everyone what she was really like. After that incident, Alexander's parents and brother insisted he break up with the aggressive Jordan. Inadequately, surprisingly, the guy listened to them for the first time and agreed that his chosen one had overreacted. That same evening, he talked to her and said that he would not return to their apartment, but would stay to live in his parents' house. The reunion and the birth of their shared children had been almost 6 months since the couple broke up. Alex returned to his studies, but continued to work. He almost no longer thought about Jordan when, on the eve of New Year's Eve 2014, she unexpectedly called and informed him that she was pregnant and that in the spring they would become parents. The guy was surprised and delighted with such news. The woman apologized to him and said that she had not informed him earlier because she was sure that he did not want to see her anymore. The guy's parents, having learned that they would soon have a grandchild, also melted and offered the woman to move into their house. She agreed and moved into the Skell family home. She officially married the father of her child, and 3 months later, she and Alexander had a common son, William. The young parents and grandparents were unspeakably happy, and until about mid-fall 2014, William they lived amicably and quietly. It was a short period when Jordan really cared about her chosen one, tried in every possible way to please him, and fell in love with the guy anew. When William was 6 months old, it turned out that the girl was pregnant again. At this time, she again became capricious and hysterical and demanded from Alexander that they immediately move out of his parents' house. The guy wrote off such behavior to raging hormones, but agreed to rent them housing in the city, where they soon moved. In the summer of 2015, the couple had a second child, a girl to whom they gave the name Alice. Alexander was absolutely happy and literally carried his wife and children in his arms. But Jordan, finally convinced that her chosen one would not leave her, now showed the dark corners of her soul. After the move, Jordan again forbade her husband to communicate with his family and did not let his parents see their grandchildren. At the same time, the woman willingly accepted financial assistance from them, and sometimes even made Alex himself ask his parents for money. In just a few months, she completely subjugated his will, breaking him psychologically, and took his life under her total control. Jordan regularly humiliated and insulted her husband, and at one point, she started hitting him, at first, not violently, as if testing how he would react. When the woman realized that her husband would tolerate everything, would not tell anyone, and nothing would happen to her for this, she gave free rein to her cruelty, displaying sophisticated sadistic tendencies towards him. It all started when they began renovating their house, and the woman was constantly dissatisfied with everything Alexander did. He carelessly noted that it was simply impossible to please her, after which a hammer flew into his head, leaving a deep wound. The bewildered guy fell down, and almost lost consciousness. Clasping the wound with his, he felt blood running down his face, and then asked his wife to help him or call an ambulance. She indifferently replied, "Crawl away somewhere and die," then went into another room to watch TV. Alex treated the head wound himself, didn't go to a doctor, and didn't say anything to anyone. From that moment on, Jordan was convinced that whatever she did, she could get away with it, and her husband would never complain to anyone and certainly would not go to the hospital or the police. 3 years of his life turned out to be incessant moral and physical torture for Alexander. He was already so depressed that he did not feel it and did not even feel the threat hanging over him. He continued to work and tried to provide his family with everything they needed, but he became increasingly irritated and discontented with his wife, who now not only beat him every day, but also invented more and more sophisticated abuse. Now the young man was forbidden to sleep on the matrimonial bed. Instead, he was confined to the floor on the bedside mat without a blanket or pillow, like a dog. He was also forbidden to enter the kitchen, and could only eat what his wife and children did not finish. In fact, Alexander was starving because he could not buy anything outside the house since Jordan took away all his money. Additionally, the woman deprived her husband of sleep and rest, having invented a new entertainment for herself. As soon as he fell asleep, she would beat him on the head, cut him, and beat him too or pour boiling water on him. Alexander later recalled waking up each time in savage pain, bloody or burned. After that, he would go to treat and bandage his wounds with improvised means while his wife went to bed quietly. Alexander perceived what was happening as something ordinary. He was finally broken morally and did not try to resist. The man completely stopped communicating with his parents and brother, and his wife on his behalf regularly asked them for money, also financially helping her own parents so that the young woman could not deny herself anything. Alexander lost a lot of weight and weighed less than 50 pounds. In addition, his body was constantly covered with wounds, abrasions, burns, and hematomas, which could not but cause questions from others. At work, he was urged to go to the hospital, so his wife forced him to quit for fear of exposure. After the dismissal, he finally became a hostage of Jordan, who now abused him day and night. Despite the horror that was going on in the couple's home, those around them still thought they were a happy family. Jordan maintained social media pages on behalf of her husband, where she regularly posted old photos of them and their children, accompanied by captions about how in love they were and how lucky they were to have met each other. No one could even think that a woman with angelic looks and the mother of 2 children, behind closed doors, turned into a real sophisticated monster. She knocked out her husband's teeth, made a long and deep cut on his arm with a knife, and his body was constantly burned. At the same time, he could not go to the hospital and at home. He only had food wrap and tape, which he used to bandage his wounds. Neighbors periodically heard screams coming from the couple's house, and sometimes they were so disturbing that concerned people called the police. However, Jordan each time managed to send away the law enforcers, convincing them that she and her husband were fine. However, during the next visit of the squad called by neighbors, one of the police officers noticed a man clutching a fresh wound with blood running down his arm. Additionally, he looked emaciated and had bruises of varying degrees on his face. The girl tried to convince the officer that her husband was mentally unstable and sometimes self-mutilated. But this time the police called the paramedics and Alex was sent to the hospital. The doctors were literally shocked at the condition in which the young man was admitted. There was virtually no life left in him, and his arm was so badly damaged that he was in danger of amputation. Alexander's body was covered with 2nd and 3rd degree burns. He weighed only 94 pounds. The ligaments of his shoulder were damaged from blows inflicted with a screwdriver, and there was a deep cut on his forearm, not counting the knocked out teeth and numerous hematomas. At that time, Jordan burst into the hospital, demanding that her husband be handed over to her and assuring everyone that nothing terrible had happened to him and that he had done all the damage to himself. However, no one believed the distraught woman, and it was decided to take her to the station for questioning. At first, Jordan denied everything and stuck to the original version that her husband was self-harming. But when Alexander's parents arrived at the station, having visited their son, the woman changed her face and began to describe in detail all the things she had done to her husband. She said she had trained him like a dog, and he wouldn't get away from her. At the same time, Jordan insisted that her husband provoked her to be violent because he was allegedly cheating on her and pissing her off on purpose. She also continued to claim that he was mentally ill and had a tendency to self-injure. Naturally, all these testimonies were categorically refuted by the guy's parents. But he himself did not immediately decide to testify against his wife. Only after undergoing a course of treatment and working with a psychologist did Alexander finally dare to talk about all the horrors he had experienced in his own home in recent years. However, Jordan was sure that she would face at most an administrative penalty. She was not too worried about the upcoming trial. However, after hearing all the testimony, Jordan was able to say that he was not afraid the judge found 22-year-old Jordan guilty of willful infliction of grievous bodily harm, moral and physical abuse, and coercive control. She was sentenced to 7.5 years in prison. Even having 2 young children was not a mitigating factor for the sadist. Jordan was shocked by this sentence, and the case itself was unprecedented for the UK. The children were left in the care of their father and grandparents while their mother served her sentence. Having fully recovered from years of torture, became involved in community work, and is now actively helping victims of domestic violence. On July 4, 2023, Jordan, having served 5 years of her 7.5-year sentence, was released on parole. However, the woman is forbidden to approach her former spouse and see their joint children. She is reportedly engaged to a bricklayer named Adam Stepp and is preparing to become a mother for the 3rd time. Despite the relief of Jordan's conviction and imprisonment, Alexander faced a long road to recovery. The psychological scars from years of abuse were deep, and it took extensive therapy for him to regain his sense of self and normalcy. He found solace and purpose in helping others who had suffered similar fates. His involvement in community work and advocacy for victims of domestic violence became a significant part of his healing process. He often spoke at events, sharing his story to raise awareness and provide support to those still trapped in abusive relationships. Meanwhile, the children adapted to their new life with their father and grandparents. The stability and love provided by their family helped them recover from the trauma of their early years. Alexander made sure they had access to counseling to process their experiences and ensured they felt safe and loved. Jordan's release on parole was met with mixed reactions. While some were relieved she had served time for her actions, others felt her sentence was too lenient given the extent of her cruelty. The conditions of her parole included a strict restraining order preventing her from contacting Alexander or their children. Despite this, Alexander remained vigilant, concerned about the potential threat she could pose if she ever violated the terms of her parole. Jordan's life after prison appeared to have taken a different turn. She seemed to be attempting to start anew. Reports indicated she was expecting another child, sparking concern about her ability to parent given her past behavior. Authorities kept a close watch, ensuring she complied with all legal restrictions and monitored her interactions with her new family. The story of Alexander and Jordan became a landmark case, influencing how domestic violence, particularly against men, was perceived and handled in the UK. It highlighted the importance of recognizing and addressing abuse in all its forms, regardless of gender, and led to changes in policies and support systems for victims. Alexander's courage and resilience not only helped him reclaim his life, but also paved the way for broader societal change, offering hope and support to countless others suffering in silence. Story 7. This is Jer's office, K9. If anybody's inside, speak up now, or you will get bit. Did you see anybody run through here? No. No one. All right, stop. Anybody in here, come out right now. What you just saw was a manhunt for an active shooter who had just gunned down 28-year-old Joshua Niles. A neighbor witnessed the entire scene and promptly reported to the police that an individual wearing a black hoodie was about to flee. Josh's 24-year-old wife, Amber Washburn, pulled into the driveway with their 4-year-old child just as the shooter opened fire. Boom, boom. The shooter fired multiple shots into the car, hitting Amber. But miraculously, the child in the back seat was left unharmed. As calls about the gunfire came in, a deputy who was nearby hurried to the scene. He found a lifeless male lying beneath a truck and another vehicle with a woman in the front seat, lifeless, and a child in the back, holding onto his McNuggets, alive but paralyzed with fear. But who is this person? Why would they take the lives of two innocent people with bright futures and put a poor child through such a traumatic experience? Born in 1990, Josh and Isles grew up in a close-knit family, fostering a deep sense of love and commitment. A dedicated family man, he actively contributed to the well-being of his loved ones. As a teen, Joshua formed a connection with his high school sweetheart, Charlene "Charlie" Albert. Their relationship led to the birth of two children, Gabby, born in 2008 when Charlie was 16 and Joshua was 18, and Bentley, born 2 years later. Despite their youth, the couple navigated the challenges of parenthood until their separation in 2012. Charlene relocated to Texas with her parents, and a co-parenting custody arrangement was established, with Josh getting the kids every summer while they lived with their mother during the school year. In 2012, a new chapter began as Josh met and fell in love with 18-year-old Amber Washburn. Each summer, the family came together as Gabby and Bentley visited, and Amber became an integral part of their lives. Their love story blossomed, culminating in the birth of their son, Joshua Jr., in 2014. Josh worked as a landscaper, while Amber pursued a career in an overnight bakery. Together, they dreamed of creating a stable future, envisioning marriage, a successful business, and a happy family life. Despite the challenges of raising their 4-year-old boy, Joshua Jr., who was on the autism spectrum, they were devoted parents. It all began on a fateful afternoon in Sodus, New York, on October 22, 2018. The serene atmosphere outside the couple's home was violently disrupted by the sound of gunfire. Just after 2 p.m., multiple 911 calls flooded in, prompting a swift response from law enforcement. Coincidentally, a Wayne County deputy was in the vicinity, serving an unrelated eviction notice. Upon hearing the calls, he hurried towards the unfolding chaos. Upon arrival, he found a lifeless male lying beneath a truck and another vehicle sitting idle across the street. Inside the front seat was a lifeless woman, and in the back, a child holding onto his McNuggets, alive but paralyzed with fear. The deputies swiftly prioritized the child's safety, entrusting him to a concerned neighbor. Once the child was safe, he called for backup and began processing the scene. Responding officers immediately started collecting evidence. In the vehicle, they found Amber's wallet, which contained her driver's license, identifying her as Amber Washburn. The male victim beneath the truck was identified as Joshua Niles. The police confirmed that the couple lived at the residence where the shooting took place. Neighbors identified the child as Joshua and Amber's son. Josh Jr., however, a critical question remained. Where was the shooter? With a gunman on the loose, police warned the residents to remain indoors until the area was secured. They set up a perimeter and worked to identify and catch the shooter, suspecting he was still within the community. The primary witness was Josh and Amber's neighbor, Tiffany Thayer, who lived next door and whose kitchen window overlooked Josh and Amber's driveway. She'd seen Josh talking to an unknown male, leaning against his truck. The gentleman was standing by a picnic table, and for some reason, Josh had pulled his truck up next to it. He was just casually leaning against the tailgate, talking. The neighbor said the conversation between Josh and the person in the hoodie seemed quite casual at first, but it quickly turned terrifying as the stranger pointed his gun at Josh and shot him. When Amber arrived home in her car, her driver's side window was lowered. Seeing what was happening, she tried to reverse to get away, but the shooter turned and shot her in the head. The shooter then turned back to Josh, ensuring Amber was dead. Josh attempted to crawl under the truck to save himself, but the shooter fired multiple shots at him. Making sense of who was behind these double homicides was a challenge. Given the way Amber was killed, it had to be someone experienced with a handgun, as it was a difficult shot. Detectives immediately thought it had the hallmarks of an assassination. Detectives located more neighbors who caught glimpses of the killer before he fled. From these accounts, they were able to come up with a description. A slender white male wearing a dark hoodie and jeans, with darker hair, a beard, and glasses. Officers started a manhunt using K9 trackers, one of whom found a piece of black cloth, later identified as a ski mask or balaclava. About 30 yards away, this mask became a key piece of evidence. As the police continued to search, they finally accepted that the shooter had escaped the perimeter. Meanwhile, homicide detectives tried to talk to Josh and Amber's son for more information. Unfortunately, the poor child, being on the autism spectrum and nonverbal, could not provide answers. Back at the crime scene, the forensic unit processed the driveway, and all the casings were from the same firearm, consistent with Tiffany Veer's witness statement, confirming there was only one shooter. The 9mm shell casings found indicated that Amber had been killed with the same gun, reinforcing the idea that the shooter was experienced. This was not a random event, it was planned. While the bodies were transferred to the medical examiner's office for autopsies, detectives contacted Josh and Amber's families. The families were in shock and couldn't imagine who would want to do this to them. During initial communications, police wanted to know if the couple had any threats or grudges against them. Josh's family stated there was no way someone would have a grudge against Josh, as he was a kind and loving person. Amber's parents echoed similar sentiments about her. When police dug into Josh's past, one name frequently came up: Josh's ex-girlfriend, Charlene Childers. The family mentioned that they had a very troubled relationship. Despite having 2 kids together, Josh and Charlene had split up in 2012, and Charlene moved to Texas with her parents. There she married Chase Childers, who helped raise Josh's kids. However, this relationship didn't last long either. Charlene started an affair with the town police chief, Timothy Dean, leading to her divorce. In Texas, Charlene worked at the Animal Control Department, which collaborated closely with the police department where she met Tim. What began as a friendship grew into a romantic relationship, and they married in March 2018. On social media, Charlene posted many pictures of her new family with Tim. However, her marriage to Tim also faced difficulties. By the latter half of 2018, Charlene and her new husband, Tim, had run into legal problems, affecting Josh and Charlene's older 2 children. This is when the dots started connecting for detectives, offering some hope in solving the case. Detectives found out that Josh was in the middle of an ongoing custody dispute with Charlene Childers at the time of his death. Charlene's trip to New York to retrieve her children just weeks before the shooting raised suspicions about her involvement. However, it was confirmed that Charlene was at her workplace during the incident, ruling her out as the shooter. When questioned, Charlene admitted to past conflicts with Josh, but denied harboring intense grudges, emphasizing that she never wished him harm. Attention then turned to Charlene's current husband, Timothy Dean, or Tim. Detectives were surprised to learn that Charlene and Tim were no longer together, and were undergoing divorce proceedings. Charlene blamed the loss of custody of her kids on Tim's influence, highlighting the strain in their relationship. Further investigation revealed that Tim was residing in Texas at the time, leading detectives to explore the dynamics of their marriage and the root causes of their disputes. Charlene elaborated on the issues that led to their estrangement, revealing a complex web of relationship challenges and legal battles. Detectives discovered that Tim had recently lost his job. Former colleagues described Tim as having little man syndrome, meaning he had an inflated sense of importance due to his position as chief of police, but people often laughed at him behind his back. The reason for Tim's job loss stemmed from a disturbing incident captured in a video uploaded by Charlene on Facebook in May 2018. In the video, Tim was seen yelling at his 3-year-old daughter Madison for not eating her food. "I'm going to snatch you up by your god-end hair. Eat your explicit food. I don't want to hear any huffing and puffing. I want to hear, yes sir, now eat." Consequences unfolded rapidly for Tim. He was arrested, lost custody of his daughter, and was compelled to resign as police chief. Charlene also lost custody of her children, and their marriage began to crumble. Eventually, her kids returned to live with their father, Joshua, in New York, leaving Charlene and Tim to face the fallout of their actions. Tim's estranged wife, Christina Hill, provided a different perspective. She described Tim as not always being like that, attributing his behavior to being in a dark place. He was about to lose his house, had no money left, was about to lose his cars, his kid, and the love of his life. Following Tim's resignation, detectives learned he had found a job as a driver for a local vending company, but had been consistently missing shifts. Intriguingly, one of the days he missed coincided with the day of the shootout in Sodus. Further investigation revealed that Tim was involved in a car crash in Kansas just 2 days before the murder. The vehicle involved was a rental car. "Officer, I got your license and paperwork for this thing." "Rental agreement?" "Tim, yeah, I was just driving. My whole life is kind of going explicit lately, more or less living out of my car." Tim mentioned he was attempting to make a U-turn because he had run out of gas, which led him to drive off the shoulder and into a culvert. However, The major question remained, why was Tim in Kansas in the first place? Tim, honestly man, I was just riding. Like I said, my life is all gone, pending divorce and all that. In further inquiry, the officer discovered that Tim was carrying additional firearms, including an AR-15, several handguns, ammunition, and body armor. The rental agreement indicated that the car was rented to an individual named Braun Bowler. Tim explained that Braun, a close friend and fellow officer during his tenure as chief of police, rented the car for him because he couldn't leave work on time. This connection prompted investigators to interrogate Braun for more information. Braun Bowler had worked as a Texas police officer for 11 years, most recently at the Sunray Police Department. According to Braun, Tim couldn't leave work to drive to New York, so Braun rented the car for him. Detectives were intrigued by this connection and decided to gather more information about the circumstances surrounding the rental car and Tim's activities. With Tim's credit cards maxed out and being 2 months behind on payments, Braun agreed to pick up the rental car under his own name. Initially, Braun didn't question Tim's request, assuming the car was for local use. However, doubts emerged after Braun received a call about Tim crashing the car in Kansas. During his interrogation, Braun reflected on his law enforcement career and his relationship with Tim. Initially, he didn't question Tim's intention for renting the car. Braun claimed he didn't realize Tim planned to drive to New York until he heard about the crash. He expressed sympathy for Tim's situation and trusted him. Interviewer. Did you question what he was doing up in Kansas? Braun. At first no. I thought he had to go up there for a free delay. My main concern was if he was okay. He said he was fine, but the car was messed up. Dean never mentioned going on a road trip to New York. He was supposed to use the rental locally. When asked about a polygraph test, Braun's results were unfavorable, leading to further questioning. Eventually, Braun revealed that he overheard Tim discussing plans to harm someone and admitted that Tim rented the car under Braun's name to avoid suspicion. Braun. I overheard Dean saying he was going to kill someone. The plan was for me to rent the car, so he wouldn't get caught. Following Braun's revelations, law enforcement secured an arrest warrant for Tim. In Dumas, Texas, officers carefully planned a nighttime operation to apprehend him due to his extensive arsenal of firearms. They used a flashbang to disorient Tim and arrested him without incident. DNA tests confirmed that Tim's DNA matched the DNA found on a ski mask at the crime scene. At the police station, detectives interrogated Tim about his connection to Josh and Amber. Tim recounted interactions during custody exchanges, but denied any grudge against Josh. Detective. Did you hate Josh? Tim. I never even met the man. Despite evidence placing him near the crime scene, Tim denied involvement in the murders, maintaining a murky story about trying to fix things with Charlene's uncle. Detectives pushed for the truth, but Tim continued to deny his involvement. Detective. Say you're sorry Josh and Amber got killed, not that you did it. Tim. No, I didn't do it. It wasn't me. Detectives then focused on Charlene, who they found at an ex-boyfriend's house. Despite initially claiming she learned of Josh's death through a Facebook post, further questioning revealed inconsistencies in her story. Under pressure, Charlene eventually confessed to her involvement. Charlene admitted that after losing custody of her children, she vented to Tim, expressing a desire for Josh to die. Tim agreed with her sentiments, and their desperation led to discussions about drastic measures. She claimed not to know much about the specifics of the murder plan or the guns used, except that one belonged to the police department. Charlene detailed meetings in Tim's garage where they planned the murder. She dropped off Braun at the rental agency, who then drove the car to Tim. Tim then traveled to New York to carry out the plan. Charlene insisted that Amber was never supposed to be involved. When Tim crashed the rental car, Charlene met him at a motel and helped him get a new rental car to continue their plan. This confession provided a clear picture of the premeditated nature of the crime and Charlene's involvement. Charlene's betrayal was especially painful for the victim's loved ones, as she had pretended to grieve with them during the funeral. This deception made the impact of her actions even more devastating. Whoever did this has now made it so my kids grow up without their father. That's nothing a kid should ever have to experience. The families of Josh and Amber demanded justice, emphasizing that their children needed closure. On November 5, 2018, charges were announced against Timothy Dean and Charlene Childers. Wayne County Sheriff Barry Virts suggested the double homicide stemmed from a child custody battle, with Timothy ultimately pulling the trigger. Timothy faced 1 count of first-degree murder and 2 counts of second-degree murder. Despite being in Texas, he was expected to be extradited to face charges. Charlene was charged with conspiracy and other offenses held in the Wayne County Jail. On June 27, 2019, Charlene pleaded guilty and testified against Timothy as part of a plea deal. She disclosed the plan, including stealing a gun from the Sunray Police Department where Timothy had served as police chief. Prosecutors alleged Timothy then traveled to New York to commit the murders. Charlene admitted during the custody battle, "I got what I wanted," referencing Joshua's death. A jury found Timothy Dean guilty of 2 counts of murder, sentencing him to life in prison without the possibility of parole in August 2019. The judge labeled Timothy a classic psychopath, noting his lack of emotion or remorse throughout the trial. Ron Bowler, the former police officer who helped Timothy rent the car, faced emotional statements from the victims' families in court. He pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit murder and served 1 year and 4 months in prison before his release. Charlene Childers received a sentence of 28 years in prison for her role in the murders. The judge remarked on the senseless and tragic nature of the case, noting the long-lasting trauma it would cause the children involved. The murders left the families grappling with profound loss. Josh and Charlene Childers were released from prison after a long time. Story 8. This is not a story about Romeo and Juliet. Have you ever noticed how many worthy, talented, and magnanimous individuals pass away young? Some people, barely crossing into their 20s or 30s, leave this life suddenly. It often seems like there were no signs of impending trouble. They lived, worked, and planned for the future, just like everyone else. However, misfortune, illness, or criminal acts disrupt the usual order, and so those who once showed great promise and were intelligent and determined are now gone. In an attempt to find solace, or due to helplessness in the face of the situation, it's often said that the heavens take the best. This same tragedy struck Jamie and Peter James. None of them could have imagined the horrific ordeal that was to come, to bury their beloved unexpected news on October 26, 2023, around 4:30 a.m., the principal of St. Andrew's Cathedral School, located in central Sydney, sent out an email to all students' parents. It stated that the school would be closed until the end of the week due to a critical incident. 2 hours later, worried families received another notification. The administration assured that none of the students were involved. The news was unsettling, especially since it was later clarified that this directive did not apply to graduating students taking exams. For those distressed by the situation, psychological support was made available. Soon, a round-the-clock consultation center was set up in the school library. On Thursday and Friday, the school building and surrounding area were thoroughly searched by forensic teams, and the adjacent shower area was slated for demolition soon. So what terrible event had occurred within the school walls? Corpse in the shower. Around midnight on October 25, 2023, the body of a 20-year-old woman was found. She had last been seen alive at 7 p.m. The water polo coach had entered the gym shower and never came out. Surveillance cameras recorded someone following her. Around 8 p.m., the pursuer left alone and headed towards the school exit. The woman's parents were the first to raise an alarm about her disappearance. And at 10 p.m., she sent a message asking to be picked up from work. Fortunately, the police, already informed about the situation, took care of it instead. The night guard, making his rounds, witnessed a horrific scene. A woman lay in a pool of blood on the floor with a shattered head. After recovering from the initial shock, he called emergency services. The woman's face was so disfigured that it was hard to recognize the once beloved Miss James. After the news of her death reached the public, her home was filled with people. Friends, neighbors, and acquaintances came to support her grieving family. Local residents also expressed their sorrow and respect for the prematurely departed, continuously bringing flowers and toys, turning the area around the house into a memorial. Yet this mysterious death was not the only intrigue in this case. Another tragic loss. On October 27th at 8 a.m., just 11 miles from the scene of the first crime, the remains of a man were discovered. This grim find was made by vendors working nearby. The body was located on the rocks of Diamond Bay Reserve, close to Vaucluse, an eastern suburb of Sydney. After a call to the police, a rescue team was promptly assembled. The operation included a bomb squad, Marine Corps, and a rescue helicopter. At 3:30 p.m., the man's body was retrieved and taken to forensic experts for identification. Due to the injuries sustained from a high fall, visual inspection was not possible, so fingerprints were used for this purpose. At that time, experts suspected the identity of the man. However, confirmation was needed for certainty. Eventually, the man was identified as 24-year-old Paul Thiessen, who was suspected in the crime against Lily James. Investigators had a challenging task ahead to draw parallels between the two fatal incidents and to uncover what had happened between these individuals a few days earlier. A diamond among the stones, Lily was born in the last spring month of 2002 in the coastal town of Sanssouci, New South Wales, Australia. She was the first and cherished child of the close-knit James family. She was especially adored by Barbara, her maternal grandmother. Lily spent her childhood with her younger brother, Max, by the ocean. She was very active and enduring with a passion for swimming. Her father, who coached the water polo team at an Anglican girls' school in Hustville, supported his daughter's interest. Friends recalled that she was sociable and friendly, excelled in her studies, and helped those who were struggling. These qualities endeared her to many, ensuring she was never alone. In her upper school years, thanks to her achievements in academics, sports, and community life, she was recognized as one of the best students. Whatever she took on, she succeeded in. Her incredible talent to excel in all areas of activity was undeniable. She also had an interest in the dramatic arts, which led her to participate in the theater and dance club. Over time, the talented young woman was noticed and invited to participate in the famous Woodford Folk Festival, one of Australia's largest annual events, attended by around 125,000 people, including local, national, and international guests. The event usually takes place from December 27th to January 1st, marking the New Year's celebration. Street performances, workshops, debates, and more. Lily chose to perform a unique rendition of a monologue from William Shakespeare's Macbeth. During the performance, her skills, natural charisma, and allure were fully displayed. Receiving unprecedented applause and approval from the jury, she secured second place in the theater category. This was a true success and a great boost, as our heroine not only gained recognition, but also a significant monetary prize. In 2018, the young Miss James added another achievement to her collection. She passed her beginner's driving test. Her athletic successes deserve special mention too. Following in her father's footsteps, she began to pursue water polo professionally. The athlete earned the title of swimming champion in the under-17 category. Understandably, her parents were thrilled with their daughter's successes and celebrated each accomplishment grandly. By her senior year, Lily had definitively decided on her future life, focusing on a sports career. Thus, in 2020, she enrolled at Sydney Technological University to pursue a bachelor's degree in sports business management. A fateful encounter at the beginning of 2021, a new chapter began in our heroine's life. To spice up her college routine and gain teaching experience, she took a job as a water polo coach at St. Andrew's Cathedral School. Thanks to her youth, vibrant personality, and love for sports, she quickly connected not only with her colleagues in administration, but also with the group she was entrusted with. The students were drawn to her, striving to match her standards. She tried to find a unique approach to each student and highlight something special. It was during this time that Lily met the new cricket and hockey coach, Paul Thiessen. With his professional skills and striking appearance, he quickly caught the attention of those around him. The ambitious young man, in addition to his main job, also taught part-time at another educational institution and was a member of the University of New South Wales hockey team, especially among female audiences. However, opinions about him were mixed. Some described him as proud and headstrong, while others noted his positive traits. Initially, the interaction between Lily and Paul was friendly and limited to mutual greetings. However, it later developed into something more. Lily's friends shared that one day the young man asked her out on a date. Given Paul's dazzling smile, it was hard for her to resist, and she agreed. The date made a strong impression on both, and they decided to meet again. Unaware of whom she was becoming involved with, Lily, due to her own kindness and openness, fell in love. It seemed that Paul reciprocated her feelings. He showered her with compliments, gave her flowers, and organized evenings together. Especially the students, should know about their warm relationship. This was a requirement of the school's policy and Lily's personal beliefs. She never wanted her personal life to be public. Therefore, at work, the couple was cautious. However, over time, rumors began to spread. Initially, timid whispers turned into a full-blown public discussion. When Lily found out who had disclosed their relationship, she was deeply disappointed. It turned out that Paul had broken their agreement. Moreover, the way he portrayed his companion led to condemnation towards the young employee. She felt betrayed and humiliated, so she confronted her boyfriend about everything she thought of him and ended the relationship. Later, it was learned that Paul tried to reconcile and repeatedly asked for forgiveness, but Lily was resolute. The only consolation for her was that their relationship was short-lived. During that time, she had seen his true character. Fortune's favorite Paul was born in 1999 in the Netherlands. The Thiessens moved to Australia in 2015 when the family head was transferred to a new position. It must be said that his parents were affluent and well-known within certain circles. As an only child, Paul received ample attention and care from his family, which certainly shaped his character. He grew up spoiled and self-centered. The younger Thiessen knew his worth, excelled academically, and was active in sports. His impressive physical fitness was immediately noticeable. After relocating, Paul enrolled at St. Andrew's Cathedral School, where he joined the cricket team. He achieved great success, earning recognition and respect from his peers. Over time, he was appointed team captain. He also actively participated in extracurricular activities and festivals, helping with their organization. That's when opinions about him began to diverge. Some boys disliked their overly confident peer who claimed he could win over any girl's heart. However, the ladies found the young man charming and personable. After graduating in 2017, the school administration offered him the opportunity to stay on as an assistant coach for cricket and hockey. He gladly accepted the offer. By early 2018, he had taken over managing these sections. It must be said that he felt confident in his workplace and successfully assumed a leadership position. Eventually, Paul resigned and returned home with his family. The reason for his sudden departure remains unknown. He decided to continue his education and earned a master's degree in sports management. In a conversation with old friends, he mentioned that he had improved his coaching skills, which soon led to a lucrative offer from his former employer. In early 2020, the doors of the familiar school reopened for him. Upon returning to Australia, Paul met a former friend who suggested they share housing expenses. The young man agreed, finding shared living more enjoyable, even though he could afford to rent alone economically. The rented apartment was located in Kensington, an eastern suburb of Sydney. Initially, the friends got along well, relaxing together at bars after work. However, a few months later, a conflict arose. The fiery Paul decided to live alone. The sons confessed that despite being busy and constantly surrounded by people, their son felt lonely. They knew nothing of any romantic relationships, though they suspected he had not experienced serious love interests. In March 2020, an unexpected event occurred both nationally and globally. Due to a coronavirus outbreak, Australia declared an emergency and imposed strict quarantine measures. For 18 months, Paul was left to his own devices, unable to leave the country to see his family due to infection risks. The massive restrictions affected all areas of life, leaving Paul to fend for himself. By the summer of 2021, life had returned to normal. However, it turned out that isolation had impacted interpersonal relationships. When Paul resumed his previous duties, some began to notice changes in his character and behavior. He soon returned to the sports world and became a key player on the hockey team, continuing to lead an active lifestyle, even appearing in match advertisements. At the same time, acquaintances noted characteristics not previously seen in him, such as uncontrollable outbursts of anger. Additionally, rumors spread at the school that he had a particular interest in his female students. The young coach repeatedly flirted with teenage girls, often watching them for extended periods, causing them to blush and feel awkward. Nevertheless, Thiessen continued to be regarded as a significant figure. His performance had a substantial impact on the team's progression to the finals of the Australian Hockey League. Imagine the blow to his ego when Lily ended their relationship, following Paul's trail. When investigators began probing the case, there was no doubt about Paul's involvement. After the discovery of a woman's body, they quickly got on the trail of the culprit. Surveillance cameras, both inside and outside, played a significant role in this. the young man carelessly appeared on them. Several inquiries were also made to Lily and Paul's cell service provider. The police needed to determine his last known location, so they decided to track the suspect via GPS. They also wanted to find the victim's phone, hoping that the messages it contained could shed light on what had happened. After some time, the locations of the devices were established. Furthermore, by reconstructing the sequence of events, it was discovered that Paul had bought a hammer at a hardware store a couple of days before the attack. Apparently, he was very angry with the girl, and decided to confront her in this way. Although her innocence in the situation seemed clear, the sequence of events unfolded as follows. Tragic conclusion. On the morning of October 25th, Lily went to university, and then to her job in the afternoon. At the same time, her ex-boyfriend rented a silver Lexus and drove to the school. Since he had no classes, he didn't enter the building but waited in the car instead. After all the students had left the building, the perpetrator walked to the gym. To avoid carrying the hammer openly, he hid it under his jacket. Once at the scene, Paul watched Lily's movements. After finishing her training, she decided to freshen up and headed to the shower. Seizing the moment when she was most vulnerable, the perpetrator followed her. An argument ensued, during which T-Sun attacked her and struck her head. Pathologists confirmed that her death was instantaneous. She did not suffer. After waiting an hour, the young man collected the girl's personal belongings in a backpack and left the building. Outside, he got into the car and drove to Diamond Bay, where he disposed of the weapon in a garbage container. Surveillance cameras recorded him at the reserve at 8:47 p.m. The last known location of Paul, tracked by investigators, was the Gap, a cliff at South Head in Vaucluse, an eastern suburb of Sydney. This spot is known for several reasons. It's not only popular with tourists, but also notorious for numerous suicides. Around 10 p.m., using Lily's phone, Hall sent a message to Mr. James, likely to lead to the discovery of the girl's body. Perhaps he regretted what had happened and hoped she could be helped, or he was simply they were clearly worried, as indicated by dozens of calls made to the phone. An hour later, the young man made a brief emergency call, but changed his mind and hung up. After that, he made a decision he had been contemplating for a long time. He stepped into the abyss and ended his life. Final clues, but they did discover the personal belongings of the former lovers. A rented car was found parked nearby. Everything indicated that the young man was no longer alive. He might have been unable to cope with his guilt or unwilling to face the consequences of his actions. In any case, the first priority was to locate his body. On October 26th at 9 a.m., police helicopters and boats arrived at Vaucluse. The entire coastline was patrolled, and the area around the cliff at Diamond Bay was cordoned off. However, the first day of searching yielded no results. By chance, the young man's body was washed onto the rocks of the reserve the following day. After an autopsy and examination, Paul Thiessen was officially declared responsible for Lily James' demise. However, it was impossible to hold him accountable, and the criminal case was closed. His body was later given to his parents, who decided not to repatriate him to the Netherlands, but to cremate him and scatter his ashes in Sydney. Farewell. Lily's funeral took place on November 17, 2023, at her former school in Hustville. About 500 people came to say goodbye to a beloved relative, friend, and coach. At that moment, grief united everyone. The school administration arranged a live broadcast of the ceremony. Notably, the girl's family asked attendees not to wear dark clothes, but instead to dress in bright colors as they believed Lily would have wanted. She was lively, energetic, creative, and unique, so a somber outfit would hardly have suited her. Many warm and sincere words were spoken about her. In response, the James family thanked everyone who had been with them during those difficult days for their support and help. At the entrance to the building, students and colleagues created a makeshift memorial in honor of their favorite. Flowers and farewell letters were placed next to it. As a tribute and respect, the school's website published a video of Lily performing a monologue from Macbeth. Conclusions. After all the circumstances of the innocent girl's death were established, the school management sent another email to the students' parents. It apologized to everyone affected by the tragedy. The principal assured that the crime was completely unexpected and would not happen again. Understandably, many were concerned that a place where children should feel safe had become the epicenter of a brutal act. The administration urged everyone to see this as an isolated incident and to continue their education with renewed vigor. Later, A meeting was arranged with renowned forensic psychologist Tim Watson Monroe, who has years of experience in analyzing the minds of both criminals and victims. He was asked to speak about what happened and to analyze Paul Thiessen's behavior. The expert assured that Paul's actions were typical of individuals with inflated self-esteem who cannot accept rejection. He believed Paul committed the act not but deliberately and coldly. He did what he wanted and showed no remorse. When asked why the young man ended his life, Mr. Watson Monroe stated that the perpetrator wanted to avoid responsibility and shame. Overall, he described Paul as a narcissistic individual with psychopathic tendencies. He also noted that some liken the event to the finale of Shakespeare's famous tragedy, Romeo and Juliet. The story of Lily and Paul is distinct from that of the main characters in the play and creates a completely new narrative. Love has no room for pride and lies, much less deceit and betrayal. Sadly, Paul failed to understand this and to appreciate the person who was by his side. By prioritizing his bruised ego, he permanently erased the life of a girl who brought light. At the same time, he caused enduring suffering not only for Lily's parents, but also for his own loved ones. Unfortunately, for the nurturing, care, and attention he received, he repaid them with bitter regret. Interested in more real-life murder mysteries? Be sure to like and subscribe to our channel. Leave me a comment and I'll read you. Enjoy life because there is only one life.